We are live. Here we go. And Mr. Gretzky's already here. See, he said, Jared, I can highlight it. Now I remember. I can make it bigger. Got me interested in Reaver, so once Trade 2 comes out later this year, I'll jump on that. Yeah, I really liked Trade 2 of Reaver even better than Trade 1, though I liked the first story. But like I said, I think I showed that last week, and I was like, why was the first story arc 6 issues and the second one 5? Who knows?
Hello.
Hello there. Say hello to everybody. We got Paolo and Scott with us. Tim will be showing up around 7, he said. Maybe if he gets out earlier, a little earlier.
He's in purgatory.
In purgatory. Oof. No fun being in purgatory.
Friday afternoon working. It's terrible.
Yeah. So did anybody get any new comics this week besides me?
No.
Oh, no.
I got one of the 2 Valerian graphic novels that I ordered.
Oh, okay.
The other one's been stuck in New Jersey for the last 8 days without any shipping updates. So
that is annoying, isn't it?
Yeah, it is annoying. Yes, I agree.
I actually bought in the springtime, I bought a bike part. Matter of fact, it's right over here. Because a gear cassette, which is just, you can't see, the back gears on a bike. So, and the reason this one is still in the box, these are the back gears that go on a bike.
Right.
Because they wear down after a while. You have to replace the chain and the gears eventually. So I ordered one off of eBay of all places, because there's bike stores on eBay you can order things from.
Right.
And then it sat in wherever the guy sent it from. You can see he sent it. His local post office got it.
Right.
And it cost about $20, I think. And it just sat there for 2 weeks in the local post office. Finally, I messaged the guy. I was like, do you know what happened? Why is the tracking says this is still in the local post office?
Yeah.
Rather than answer me, he just refunded my money.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. So then I took the money and ordered another one and got that. And then a few days after I got that one, this one showed up.
That one showed up, yeah.
I was like, all right, I got one for next year when the other one wears down. But that's what same thing. It sat in the local post office for 2 weeks with no explanation. Mm-hmm. So it was a little weird.
I probably would not want to be a postal worker right now. They take too much flack as it is.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the stuff they have to deal with is way beyond their control.
It was funny because I was just at my local post office, and I was because sometimes I make altered art Magic the Gathering cards and sell them on eBay. I used to play Magic the Gathering. I found out altered art cards were a thing years ago, and I figured out how to make some. That's why I do, and I put like comic book things on them sometimes.
Yeah, there's another artist I follow, and I can't remember which one it is that does that too, and he does it fairly often.
Yeah, and one of the funny things was when you sell things on eBay, of course, I've sold comics on eBay and other such things, and it's always annoying when something gets destroyed in shipping. Sure, I've had over the years maybe. It's like my eBay rating is like, I don't know, 500 positive stuff. And it's 100% now. Right. But I've had maybe 2 things go wrong in shipping.
Yeah.
And one thing I went, and I'm always kind of like, I don't like to write "do not bend" on things for just the explanation I'm about to give. So, but I do now because I sent one of the things that got destroyed in shipping. The guy gave me a bad feedback and even wrote, he didn't even put "do not bend" on it. And I'm like, I'm always of the notion that if you've got a good postal worker, he's not going to bend it. Especially the stuff. I mean, in order to bend the stuff I send, you have to break it over your knee. I mean, you can't just accidentally bend it.
Right.
So I was dropping off a card in the post office. It's in like a 5x7 stiff cardboard envelope.
Right.
You know, and I wrote "Do not bend" on it because that's what I do now because of the one person who complained. Right. And the post office guy was like, "Oh, this guy thinks we're going to bend his card," and I'm like, "You know what? That's there because one guy complained." And he even said the same thing. He was like, "Do you think?" He's like, "If the only way they're going to bend it, generally, something like that, is maliciously." And I figure a malicious post office worker who likes to bend things is going to pick the do not bend stuff.
No, I think he has specific instruction.
Yeah.
It has to fit inside the mailbox. Right. It does not care that it's not supposed to bend. It has to be inside the mailbox for its own safety.
But it has the word bend on it. I don't care about the do not part before it. It just says bend, you know.
Your desires are immaterial to the work of a postal office.
Most everything is fine, but I have had at certain times people have wrote me special notes saying, please make it so you can't possibly bend it because my post office guy bends everything. So I was like, okay.
Yes,
but
he does.
I always find that fun. But, you know, like, do not bend. What does that really do? So I bought a Marvel comic this week.
Ooh.
Of course, it's a reprint. It's one of the True Believers, issue 58 of X-Men. Neil Adams drawn, first appearance of Havoc. Though I don't think it was his first. I think this is the first time he appeared in costume because the story continues from another issue that I think Alex Summers was in. But this is the first time he's in the costume, so I was like, you know what? I'll buy that for $1. I have you guys bought any of these True Believers stuff? Well, I'm sure Paolo hasn't.
I bought one.
Dollar comics don't make it over to Portugal too much.
No, we can order them. I have the Avengers Annual number 10.
Oh, okay.
The first appearance of Rogue.
I got the Conan True Believers.
Yeah, there's been a lot of X-Men stuff this past 2 weeks. They finally got the True Believers line going again this month.
Right.
There's a Neil Adams Masterworks, I think, with the X-Men stories. So,
yeah, yes, that's probably. I just wanted it because I like them as comics, and it's $1.
Right.
But there was about 8 other X-Men True Believers in the last 2 weeks, but none of them did I want.
Well, that makes me wonder if they have a market for reprints at $1 each, how well they would sell.
They keep making them, so I mean it's all great. Yeah, first in costume, first named Havoc. Yeah, I think that's it.
In a certain sense, in a certain way, it kind of makes sense when you're trying to build up runs, but they're interrupted because one issue is a key, and it's worth $600, while all the others around it are $2.
Right.
Yeah, make that. Right. Just do one of those, and it fits nicely in there.
Yeah.
Unless we are one of those picky collectors that, no, I must have the first print. Do you have $600? No. Then buy that one.
I'm perfectly happy with the reprints. I don't even know if I have this original or not. Actually, let me show you. I'll be right back. I'm going to walk into my X-Men collection in the other room.
I remember those first Neil Adams issues. They came out out of sequence. They were running as backups in the Brazilian Captain America, but at the time the X-Men were what? The X-Men were in the Paul Smith.
Paul Smith.
Yeah, they ran those Neil Adams issues out of sequence because they wanted the readers to have access to them, but the X-Men were already going into the Claremont Paul Smith run. So they ran those in Captain America. They were also phasing out Indiana Jones, so they had a slot, and they were and before they started with the New Defenders and the New Mutants. So they ran that.
Mm-hmm.
Then a few years later, they came back to those stories. Now the X-Men had their own comic, and they ran the Sauron stories.
Why did they run them out of sequence? Sleepy Reader wants to know. Just the way they.
Sometimes it depends on when that publisher started running series, because they got the rights to some characters, then they got the rights to other characters, then they got the rights to all the characters, then they lost the rights to some of the characters because they weren't publishing them. In this case, what happened, since they were running the X-Men in another magazine but wanted to publish specifically those stories because they were good, right, they just put them out of sequence in a magazine where they usually wouldn't appear.
I've always wondered how Marvel got away with using the name Sauron without getting sued by the Tolkien estate.
Because copyright and trademark law doesn't work like that. As long as you don't name a comic Sauron, I think you're okay.
Okay, gotcha.
And I think
something like that.
Sauron is not trademarked. Is a character inside the Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings is trademarked. Plus, the names of each of the individual books are trademarked, but the characters are not. I don't think there's maybe there is now because of the movies. But there was no Legolas trademark.
Well, the Tolkien estate has a history of litigation using certain terms from both The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and they're kind of iffy about how it's applied.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I find interesting? Part of my job when I was pasting up covers back at Marvel was to make sure that every logo had either a TM, which means you claim that trademark, or an R, which means you've registered that trademark with the government on it. Since Disney took over, Disney doesn't bother to trademark stuff. If you look like this X-Men comic right here, there's no R or TM at the end of X-Men. There's no R or TM down by the Havoc, which is what I'd have to put there on every cover.
Right.
And even, I do have the original one here. Even here, you can see they put the TM right in the middle of the logo.
Yep.
So it's like they don't have one on Havoc there. In the 90s, I would have put one on Havoc there too. You trademark everything you claim as a trademark. Well, Disney doesn't do that. I guess Disney's got so many lawyers that they don't care.
Yeah, they have really deep pockets.
Yes, yeah.
I remember an issue of Uncanny X-Men. The X-Men went off to the Shi'ar Galaxy because the Phalanx were taking over the Shi'ar Empire. How do you take over the Shi'ar Empire? But the cover has the X-Men fighting members of the Phalanx. X-Men has the R logo, and then the characters are talking to each other. They have speech balloons, and every time they mention each other's names, there's Beast TM.
Right.
We're being overrun. Well, keep fighting, Rogue TM.
Yeah.
Well, you take over the Shi'ar Galaxy by using Shi'ar Audacity.
But anyway, I wanted to show you this original just because I got this back in high school, and I remember it because I found them at a garage sale. Let me just... Yeah, trademark is harder. Trademark is harder. No, a copy, an R means registered trademark. That means you actually registered it with the government. TM means I claim this trademark. And if someone tries to take it from you, they'll have to prove that you didn't TM it. So,
but even if you have the R, you have to keep using it. Otherwise, it's considered abandoned, and you may lose it.
Unless you're Disney, then you just don't use ours, and you dare them to come after you.
And that's why
you want to use the X-Men name. Come on.
That's why Metallica's lawyers had to sue, because they own the right. They own the masters of their music, which most bands don't.
No, that's copyright. That's not trademark.
Well,
right.
But I'm talking just IP in general. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's copyright. There's trade. It's weird.
There's all kinds of.
But anyway, I got these X-Men at a garage sale in high school. And I remember it. I got some old X-Men. And this is like 1982 or so. So it was something finding Silver Age comics at a garage. You know, I didn't find them that often. But what made these stand apart was the holes in them. 1, 2.
Oh my God.
3. And you see the reinforcing tape?
Yeah.
And the tape is still in good condition. I'm told this is the Scotch Magic tape that's in the green, has the green label. That's the stuff that's more archival.
So he punched him out for a 3-ring binder?
Someone punched him out for a 3-ring binder. And it turns out more than one person did that. I mean, if you look up like comic book flaws or something like that, this is one of them. Because in the 60s, a bunch of people did this to their comics. But I only have this one, and they're still in good shape. I mean, they're still, you know, since these aren't full bleed comics, the holes are in the gutters.
Right.
Now, I find that interesting. You know, someone went to the trouble of punching holes in their comics and reinforcing it with tape. The indicia of a recent comic says all characters in the comic are trademarks of DC Comics.
Yeah, comic books have a very good specificity.
Right. DC still uses R's and TMs though. Because
the characters have costumes, and you can trademark those costume designs because they're unique.
Right.
You can't trademark a guy wearing a suit. You can. You can copyright the characteristics of the person in that this person wears a suit, and if you combine with other characteristics, and somebody else makes a character that is just like that one, you can claim that the character is a copy of and is violating your copyright. But the character design in a comic book superhero is unique enough that you can always trademark it.
And I also just recently read, too, I didn't realize this. If you make a logo out of something, you now have trademark in perpetuity to it. And this is how I just read, this is how the Disney company makes a logo out of Mickey Mouse, that one image of Mickey Mouse, or they actually make a logo out of about 6 images of Mickey Mouse. Those images never go into the public domain because they're, what is it called? I can't remember what it's called now. They're not they're not intellectual property. They're logos which you're allowed to use in perpetuity. Someone can still use the original. They might lose the copyright on the stuff, but they never lose the rights to that image, and no one else can use it.
Here's the thing: because the logos have a design. They also have copyrights, which so the copyright of that logo remains in copyright as long as the copyright terms are fulfilled. So even if you lose the trademark, let's just say that somehow Disney loses the trademark to Mickey Mouse. They wouldn't lose the trademark; they'd lose the copyright. No, they lose the copyrights are supposed to go into the public domain, but the thing is here,
the copyright applies to the intellectual, like the copyright applies to literal the right to copy, like to copy video of Mickey Mouse, to copy the actual text to Tarzan.
But that's not all. You see. If somehow Disney lost the trademark to Mickey Mouse,
right?
Whoever re-registers the trademark can't use that logo because that logo has a copyright associated to being a trademark.
There's actually a third thing I'm not remembering the name of that isn't copyright. Because what it is it's copyright actually refers to sort of like right now. I think it is. Oh, even these Here we go.
The United States also has one problem, is that your copyright laws don't recognize authorship.
There's
In
US
Europe,
copyright laws are different than European ones.
yes, because in Europe, everything is supposed to have a moral author. So even if you don't own the right to your work, you're entitled to be recognized as its author.
Right.
Even if you're the Marquis de Sade, well, I mean, wouldn't they claim you as an immoral author?
Yeah.
I get Walton Skizix here, the original Gasoline Alley.
Yeah.
All the strips are in the public domain. So these strips are all reprinted, I think, from the actual newspapers. So they rebuilt them. So all the strips are in the public domain, but the name Gasoline Alley is still trademarked.
Yes.
It's not in the public domain. So there's Gasoline Alley ones. These are the official license by the owner of the name Gasoline Alley. And these are the ones from the 1920s. What is this? 1931 to 1932. Pardon me. So it's like you can reprint these because they're in the public domain, but you can't use the name. So I find that interesting too. The difference between trademark and copyright is kind of nutty.
Thanks, Sonny Bono.
Exactly. We there were some issues with automotive brands a few years ago when Volkswagen bought the rights to use the Bugatti name. They, even though Bugatti had gone out of business, in order to use the original Bugatti logo, they had to buy it from whoever owned the industrial property of the Bugatti brand.
Right.
Ah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty cool. I've been like I said, I've been liking these dollar reprints a lot. They've got some good printing on them, so that counts for something. Then I got Outcast number 46. Only 2 issues after this one and this one. I'm like the only one left buying this.
Who is doing that?
This is Robert Kirkman and Paul Azaceta.
Okay. The reason I asked is that logo looks oddly familiar, but I can't place it. Like maybe like Paul Pope did that or something.
Ah, yeah, I can see what you mean. But Paul Azaceta used to work in the Marvel bullpen in the early 2000s. So.
Yeah, I have some BPRD books he did.
And he's very Mazzucchelli influenced.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, a friend of mine just asked me, he's like, how is that? I bought like the first 6 issues of it and then fell off it. I'm like, well, if you didn't like the first 6 issues, you probably won't like it now.
Right.
But I like it because it's it's the same team from the first 6 issues. I don't know how it would get suddenly that he likes them, but
yeah, we have those in hardcover here, but I'm not buying them.
Yeah, it's just like at 48. It's a story about sort of demons, but they're really extra-dimensional creatures kind of taking over. Like I said, I've enjoyed it. It's not if you tried an issue and didn't like it, you probably aren't going to like it 20 issues later. But I find it fun.
Gotcha.
Then I got Big Girls number 2, Jason Howard. I liked this better than issue 1, which is always good. This is the story of post-apocalyptic future where there's some disease that turned people into giant monsters, and the giant monsters destroyed the earth, except there's like some pockets of civilization left, and they found that some of the people who were turned into giants stayed human, and it was always the women. So hence Big Girls. They're literally 40 feet tall, just like the monsters, and they've got to fight the giant monsters. Issue 2 I found was better because it added more subtlety to it. we now got into like there was a few of the giant women. They're human beings too, so they don't always get along perfectly. And we found out there's like a city, a walled city that's using the giant women to fight off the monsters. But there's also people living outside the city, and they don't really like the city folk much because the city folk don't care for them much. So there's this tension going on between the people living in different places too, as well as the giant monsters. So this one, it's a good 2-issue, and I liked. Let's see, Jason Howard, I think, did Trees with Warren Ellis. That's where I first saw his stuff. He's got a weird style. He's got this style where he draws like there's that face right. Let me see if I can get it without a glare. He just draws things like fuzzy sometimes.
It reminds me a little bit of Guy Davis.
A little bit, but Guy Davis wasn't. Guy Davis's. I don't think Guy Davis's fuzziness. I think was like he does this weird shade. Like, why is that shading on the side of her jaw right there?
Right,
and then just like her jawline just gets some fuzzies on this side too.
Yeah, it's almost like facial hair.
Yeah,
I blame the colorist on that one.
It's like, why are those fuzzies there? I don't know. It's just a weird stylistic quirk of his that sometimes I find distracting, but I generally like his storytelling.
Right.
Let's see, what is Sleepy Reader saying here? I once read that Don Rosa trademarked his name as a way to get paid a little for reprints with his name on the cover. Okay, that sounds like a good idea. I know I don't think he gets. I remember hearing stories about him not getting like paid hardly anything for all those Duck story reprints they put out.
Don's at the Heroes Con every year, and he always tells the story. He likes it there because it's so laid back there compared to the type of treatment he gets at European conventions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's like a superstar artist, especially in the Norwegian and the Scandinavian countries. They just go
love Disney.
Yeah. Which is why it's weird that they don't take care of them like they should. Whoever's got that license over there.
Yeah.
It always amazes me, comic book, the comic book industry's ability to not take care of their talent. It's just
very
like
much, yeah.
It just amazes me. I mean, it's been happening for 80 years, and still I'm like, how can they?
I think the Disney Studios in Denmark is owned by Egmont, and Egmont is a big publishing house, more than just comics, everything. So whoever does one thing is not important.
Yeah. That means everybody's not important, and it's just like, that seems a weird business model, but they're still doing it, so it must work somehow.
One guy who draws the comic books with the ducks, I don't care.
Yeah, that's only 1% of 1% of our output.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised Disney hasn't tried to buy Barks Root Beer and just rebranded as Carl Barks Root Beer.
Disney never promoted Carl Barks.
No, they never did. No.
They never did. He was well known before anybody knew his name. That's how little. Well, actually, Disney had almost nothing to do with the comics, too.
Right. Speaking of Disney and the way they treat their artists, have you watched the documentary on Floyd Norman?
No,
it's really good. It's worth watching. It's every once in a while there'll be some discussion of what happened in his career and kind of how he was treated. And he had to deal with a lot of racism and things like that. But it's worth watching just to. Well, first of all, it's worth watching just to see it because he's a really good artist. But just seeing how some of those guys got treated over the years is terrible.
It's amazing how badly creative people across lots of industries get treated. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
But that's how greedy people, when I think it comes down to when your motivation is business, often your motivation is greed.
Right.
And like that's who gets attracted to that business. It's like it's very tough for a creative person who wants to kind of get paid to compete with people whose whole job it is to get paid.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like you're busy creating Donald Duck comics and you want to, get paid for them. You can't compete with the guy whose whole job it is to make money, and Donald Duck comics happens to be the way he makes money. That's all he thinks about his whole day is how do I make money?
Right.
And you think about that for a small part of your day. And you just can't compete.
I remember Jeff Smith told a story that Disney was interested in picking up the license for Bone. And he said the offer they gave him wouldn't even buy him a sports car.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing how little they get stuff for, too.
Right.
And how little goes back to the original creator. Well, the last comic I got for the week is Once and Future number 11. I'm enjoying this one, but I think I'm enjoying it a little less than I first did because there's a lot of fights going on in this. And like this whole issue was just kind of a fight scene.
Yeah.
Not that it was bad. It was well done. It was the grand, and it was also fight scenes that I don't quite get. Like, I don't quite believe, I should say. There's this giant monster, Grendel. There's our giant monster. And look at the size of that giant monster and those little people down there. And fighting Grandma Monster Hunter and her grandson, who's a big strapping guy, but still, that's a giant monster who just, where are we? Tore open a car.
Yeah, you need an elephant gun.
You need an elephant gun, and she's got to chop
bullets.
his arm off. And it's like, here, her grandson, she's like, keep him busy. So it's like, what's he doing there? How exactly is he keeping him busy? Wouldn't he just get eaten in that panel?
Yes.
But then in the next panel, we see him, the grandmother stabbed him with a knife earlier. So.
Oh, I think, isn't this a scene from Sharknado? When Ian Ziering gets eaten by the shark and then comes out of from inside the shark with a chainsaw.
That's so much of a cliche these days to get eaten by a monster and then cut your way out from the inside.
Well, that's not what happened here. The monster just threw him. First of all, a monster who could tear open a car with its claws throws you just die. I mean, that's it. It's over for you. So then the grandmother comes back with a chainsaw. And the monster's just standing there as she cuts off his arm. And she even says, where is it? Harder than it looks, chainsawing a monster. All the sinew and bony bits. So finally she gets through his arm with the chainsaw. And that's how, because that's how he died. But it's like he just stood there while she cut off his arm with a chainsaw? So like the fight scenes in this book to me are like, you're gonna make one long fight scene. You got to do better than that.
Her fight coach was Ash Williams.
And then of course at the end, near the end, we get this guy. And if you know the Beowulf poem, first Grendel shows up and gets killed by Beowulf, and then Grendel's mother shows up. So you know Grendel's mother is showing up. So now here's this guy just standing there saying, oh no, Grendel's mother is going to show up. And since he's an incidental character, he just gets killed as Grendel's mother reaches right through the wall and him. And it's like, why didn't this happen to the other guy who Grendel was just holding there like that for no? It's like, the fight scenes in this I just don't like because of the strength. I just don't buy them.
Right.
I like the comic itself, but I'm not buying into the fight scenes because Grandma and her kids, the grandma and her grandson, are fighting these giant monsters who are big, huge, and super strong. and they're just not getting killed by them. Meanwhile, the monsters are killing like everybody else they run into, so easily.
All right.
So it's kind of like, huh?
They have plot armor.
Yeah, they have plot armor. That's what's annoying me about that. The plot armor that these two characters have. Because I generally like Kieran Gillen's writing. What did he write? Not East of West. Wicked and Divine. I enjoyed that. I enjoy. What else did he write? All of a sudden, Uber has been really good. But this one, right? Like I said, I enjoyed the first. I still enjoy parts of it, but the fight scenes I don't enjoy. And we have an issue that's one long fight scene. I'm just like, you gotta give me a little more. But it's still on my pull list. It's not going anywhere. It's hard for a book to get off my pull list because, like, most of the stuff I get is indie stuff, so it's done by the same people.
Right.
So if I like some of it, I'm probably going to like all of it.
I was cataloging some of my comics the other day, and I didn't realize it until I was going through them, but I have like 2 Appleseed series that were done by Eclipse back in the 90s. And I'm missing issue number 5 out of both the series. I'm like, what is this? I'm just now noticing this like 20-some years later, you know?
It's amazing some of the things you can notice 20-some years later.
Right.
Well, I've never read Appleseed. How is that? Another Japanese one, right?
Yeah, it's done by the same creators. What's his name? Masamune Shiro. The same fellow that did Ghost in the Shell.
Okay. Another one I haven't read.
Right. I like it. Now, your mileage may vary, but
right.
It's good if you like a techno thriller sort of a story.
Okay. Yeah, I've like I said, yeah, I find I've liked most Japanese comics I've read, but I think I've only read the best of the best kind of thing. If it makes its way to me,
right,
it's really good.
You get the filtered,
right? I get the best stuff. I don't go out looking for Japanese comics to find the good ones. The good ones come to me because people say you got to read this one, you got to read that one. Oh, this one's real good.
Yeah, I knew people starting in the 80s when Japanese animation started getting bootlegged and then sent over to the US, on VHS, and people would get this and they would watch it just because it came from Japan.
Oh yeah.
And I remember somebody says, you got to watch Project A-ko. You got to watch Project A-ko. And I watch it. It's like, I can't watch this. It's so sickeningly saccharine sweet. No, I just can't do it.
It becomes exotic, so it's more interesting. That's what happens to people.
No, not to me. It's like if it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad.
Yeah, I'm like that too. Yeah. But some people get into like ones, like what do they call them? Anglophiles. Love anything out of England.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of, I just watched Johnny English the other day.
Was that with Rowan Atkinson?
Yeah, it's actually a lot funnier than I expected. It was worth watching.
Yeah. I think there's 2 of them, right?
There's 3 now. There's one that was released a couple years ago. Yeah,
I think I watched 2 of them. They were all right. I've liked Rowan Atkinson since Blackadder. So
right.
Yeah. You got to look for all the other stuff that is in because some people get used to seeing him as Mr. Bean, and it's probably the least funny stuff he did.
Yeah, I was not a Mr. Bean fan. I saw some of it here and there. I liked him in Blackadder. That's where I first saw him.
I was just pleasantly surprised that Johnny English was as funny as it was.
There was a cop show he was in. It was a sitcom, but he was the police commissioner. What was his name?
I think I may have seen that because I remember him in the hat.
No, it's not that one. There's a drama. There's a drama he's in where he's playing the French inspector from the 1930s. But that's a drama. But he was a police commissioner. Let me check. Rowan
Look
Atkinson.
that one up.
IMDb.
Isn't it amazing how we can look everything up these days?
I'm so glad that both IMDb and the Grand Comic Book Database both exist.
Yeah.
I can't look at it too. Friend Laurie. What's this one?
Speaking of British actors, Brian Blessed now has a podcast where he reads bedtime stories. I can't wait to listen to some of those. I imagine they're going to be hilarious.
The Thin Blue Line.
The Thin Blue. Yeah, I don't know if I've seen that one. Comic Crack is waiting till he fills the gaps in his run.
Don't wait 20-some years and then discover that you have a gap.
It was published by Eclipse. I think Terrence was building up his Eclipse collection. I remember he said he wanted to have all the issues. Yeah. So if Apple sees Eclipse,
he's got to get it.
I think I may have mentioned this before, but there's a really interesting blog that I can find a link to where a guy had wrote reviews of everything that Eclipse had ever published. Mm-hmm. It was actually pretty interesting to go through it and see all the different, comments that he made.
Yeah, I haven't seen anybody collect undergrounds like Comic Crack has for the last, I don't know, how many years has he been on YouTube now? I think he came on just after me, so it's at least 5. He's getting closer for his apple seed. And here's did you guys see the meme that started going around this week about pick 4 movies you like better than anyone else you know?
No.
Well, someone turned that meme into a pick 4 comics that you like better than anyone else you know. And I actually did that. I picked 4 comics I like better than anyone else I know. So I'll show you those.
Lay it on us. Let's see.
I've mentioned this one before. I even did a video on it. Here's Negation, the prequel.
Yeah.
And I like this whole series, but I even like this prequel a lot because this is a jailbreak issue. It starts the prequel off, and here's our lead character here. He's a human. He doesn't have superpowers, but he's he's the leader. He's a military guy, and he's the leader. And all these people are trapped with him on this prison planet in, like I said, the Negation takes place in a different universe from the cross-gen universe. So it's like there's the cross-gen universe. Well, the cross-gen has a few different planets and stuff on it where that's all united by the sigils. And this is a different universe. Whereas there's this guy, Charon. Comic Crack's been on 8 years now. Oof.
Is he Sauron's brother?
So, Sauron's brother, Charon. Well, he doesn't have the U. He's Charon.
Gotcha.
And he runs this whole universe. And eventually the story was going to... Negation War was the miniseries that got interrupted by CrossGen going out of business. And that was going to be the culmination of CrossGen's existence with all their heroes fighting Charon. But this story actually takes place in Charon's universe. And this guy and a bunch of the people he found himself stuck on this prison planet. And he and this bunch of guys break out of the prison planet. And then the rest of the Negation series, they're just on the run trying to figure out what to do, trying to live because everybody in the universe is after them. And this is the first place I saw. Tony Bedard does the writing on the series. It's got Mark Waid on this too, but Tony Bedard does the writing on the whole series is good. And Paul Pelletier does most of the drawing on the series itself. And this is the first place I saw Paul Pelletier, who's gone on to do yeoman's work for Marvel. He's done a lot of Hulk stuff and this and that. And someone I think on here called him like the Sal Buscema of Marvel these days in terms of doing yeoman's work. And I think he's a really good artist and a really good storyteller. But like I said, he's not one of the... And CrossGen had good coloring on it too. This came out in 2000. So that, even in 2000, CrossGen was like one of the first ones to do computer coloring right pretty consistently. The Path was CrossGen. Yeah, that was, I think it was Bart Sears was the Path. I liked most CrossGen books, but this was my favorite. And I'm the only one who ever talks about it. I actually got to see Tony Bedard at a convention once a few years ago and tell him how much I appreciated this series. So if you can find these dirt cheap wherever you can find CrossGen books. It's like, yeah, there's the Negation #1. There was, 25 issues of the Negation, somewhere around there, a mini series or two. And then it was all going to be wrapped up in Negation War, and CrossGen folded. It was like,
I hate it when that happens.
And Marvel now owns the rights to this because Disney bought them. But Marvel's never going to.
What hasn't Disney bought yet?
Yeah, exactly. Matter of fact, I remember reading Disney bought the rights to CrossGen out of bankruptcy just to get the rights to Abazad, the Mike Plug one.
Yeah, that's what we talked about last week.
Yeah. And then here's one that Terrence might be interested in. Let's go back to what year was the first Turtles book? 84?
Yeah, around there, I think. Yeah.
Because I think, let me see what year this was. This was also 84. So I think this was part of the black and white explosion. There's a comic no one knows exists. You can find it at mycomicshop.com. There's 4 issues of it. It's Max of the Regulators. It's totally crazy, insane comics. It takes place in a universe where there's only one law. No one's allowed to have guns but the Regulators. So the Regulators go around shooting people who have guns.
I think Terrence showed that in a video. Didn't you?
Yeah, did you have this one? And it's just like this bizarre black and white comic. Who did this? By Frederick Cooper is the artist, and William Anderson is the writer. I don't know if they've ever done anything else. Their editorials were entertaining. I remember that. I just reread this recently too, and it's just a nutty comic. It's like just some crazy talented amateurs putting together a comic, and it's just fun.
Those types of editorials. Years ago, I'd love to read those, but nowadays, when I buy a comic and it has a text section, I just can't do it anymore. I don't know why.
I read some of them. Comic Crack doesn't have that. Yeah, it looks. I thought this one would be up your alley due to, like I said, it's the art is just kind of crazy. So I think they pulled the same gag twice, where they just shoot someone. There's Max of the Regulators, and he's got a partner, and I think his partners kept getting killed too, or he finally got this one woman partner, and it was like one of them would throw a gun on the bed and go, "Look, a gun," and then just shoot the guy, and then go, "Oh yeah, that was my gun," and put it back. And it was like they pulled that same gag twice in the comic. And this is of course the cover is a reference to Looney Tunes. I think it was Duck Dodgers in the 24th century, where Daffy Duck ended up on the
24th and a half century.
24th and a half century.
Yeah.
That's a dumb page. What does it say? In this publication, you will never see any scenes of suggestive violence or nudity, such as this or this or this.
Right.
Excess of 20%.
Yeah.
Oh, John. It's just like such an amateur comic, but fun.
But you bring up a good point. There's a lot of series that took place back around, that black and white explosion, where the creators really didn't. I mean, they did like 1 or 2 series, and a lot of them never did anything again.
Right.
And then you wonder whatever happened to such and such.
They didn't make any money doing it. They went and did other jobs. Like I said, these two, Atlantic comics. And what was weird, I think there was like I think there was some weird tax scam going on with this too. It's like in the next issue, they've changed from Atlantic Comics to Atlantic, and he talks about selling the comic from himself, from his brother to himself, or something weird. I'm like, what the heck's going on with this comic? And are they got some sort of tax scam going on selling? I don't remember what it was, but it was just weird. But
almost
just
like the producers.
yeah. But there was some producers like thing going on. And then there was like, it's time for the second story. They were just like drawing things they like to draw. And then the second story was just like these two guys hunting each other or something. It was just like, yeah, they were just drawing what they like to draw. But it was a lot of fun. So there's a comic I like more than anyone else I know, probably because no one even knows it exists.
I must admit, I've heard of a lot of indie black and white titles from the 80s, but I had not heard of that one.
No one's heard of this. There's 4 issues.
I'm sure I've got some really obscure stuff.
Well, yeah. If I don't even, I think this came into my comic shop in 1984, right. And I was there that week and saw it and said, "Looney Tunes, let's pick this up." And then I put it on my pull list because it was so goofy. Otherwise, I never would have seen it, or because no one knows it exists. But if you go to mycomicshop.com, I think you can actually get it there. Right. Of all places. Now we're going to hit you with something modern. The comic book that I like that nobody else does. Or that is Drifter. This is the last issue of Drifter I picked because this was where it all paid off. This was the most emotional issue. I don't know if you guys ever saw it. Was an Image comic. Let's see, when was the last issue? By Ivan Brandon and Nick Klein. No. Where is the? Oh God! They printed the indicia purple on black.
That's hard to read.
I got to get it in the light over here.
That's hard to read even in good lighting.
2017.
Right.
So I think it may have started in like 2015 and went on to 2017. But it started out as kind of a space western. John is here again. Hey. I've looked up Drifter books in the shop, but haven't picked it up. It's really, I like it because it starts out as kind of a space western. It's got some nice art too. Was it Nick Klein? Is he the artist, or Nick Klein? I think is the artist. It's got some really nice art in it, some good storytelling, and it starts out sort of like a space western with a mystery behind it, and you don't find out the answer to the mystery to the end of the series. And it actually had an answer to the mystery that I enjoyed. I almost feel like giving away the answer to the mystery, but I won't because it's kind of cool to find it out. But I reading it the second, I actually reread it just this past winter. And reading it a second time through, knowing the answer to the mystery, things read a lot differently.
Gotcha.
And like I said, it starts out as a space western, but this guy kind of wakes up on this space western planet, and his spaceship is crashed. He doesn't know what happened. Everybody from the spaceship is gone. He goes into the space western town, and the people are weird. And there's these aliens who are dangerous, who live on the planet, who mostly ignore the humans, but are a danger to the humans too. And this guy finds out that his spaceship crashed a year ago. So it's like, what do you mean my spaceship crashed a year ago? I just woke up this morning with my crashed spaceship. So then there's all sorts of trouble in town. There's trouble with the aliens. It gets into this sort of philosophical area of, what it's like to be human. And so it's just, I just found it really interesting. Like I said, really nice artwork, interesting story with a mystery. And I liked the way the mystery paid off. it paid off with something I hadn't seen before. So I really enjoyed it. But Drifter, if you ever want to read a good, I'm sure it's all collected because it's Image Comics. If you ever want to read a good space western mystery that poses existential questions about what it's like to be human, check this one out. John says, "Hey to Paolo too." I didn't see him. Oh, sounds good. Yeah. Hey Paolo. There we go. He didn't say hello to Scott. What's that all about? He snubbed him. Whoa. Then I think we mentioned this one, so Scott may like it as much as I do, but I figured I'd show it off.
I like.
You remember?
I like the cover. Oh, Jason Lutz.
Yeah, this is I think we mentioned this on the show a couple weeks ago. I can't remember who mentioned it.
Yeah, we were talking about Berlin a little bit.
Right. This is the one that first appeared in Dark Horse Presents.
Okay.
And it's Ed Brubaker and Jason Lutz. And it's a sort of a murder mystery story about what happens to, I think the guy, I'm gonna have to reread it. But I think the guy discovers a body and it affects him. And the mystery of who killed that person affects him.
Was that in the first run of Dark Horse Presents?
Yes.
I believe I have at least one issue that I remember this Ed Brubaker's name was assigned to.
Right. And it's good stuff. And this is before Ed Brubaker became the DC Comics writer. This is when he just stopped being the autobiographical guy and started being the crime guy.
Okay.
And this is kind of one of his crime comics. Let's see. And it's a little bit big. It's like Golden Age size. It's a little bit bigger than a regular comic, which is strange. Let's see. It's a little bit wider, pardon me.
Right.
It won't fit in a regular comic book bag because it's slightly wider.
So it's like Silver Age size?
Yeah. But it's not taller, which is strange. So I have it in a Silver Age Mylar bag. They put it out in this standalone volume by itself. What year is this? Come on, there's got to be some printing information. That's blank. Oh, there we go. 2001 this came out. Wow. First printing February 2001. Dark Horse. I think they put out this. Did they put out this volume too? No, this is Drawn and Quarterly. Pardon me.
Okay.
Oh, I guess since Lutz went over to Drawn and Quarterly, they put out this since it was creator owned. So Drawn and Quarterly put this out in 2001. $4 that was the original price on it. So if you can track that one down, give it a look. But those were the 4 comics that I liked better than anyone else I know. Negation. Max of the Regulators, Drifter, and The Fall.
I would have to put some very hard thought into coming up with a list of 4. I can think of probably 2 right off the top of my head. But
what 2 do you have for it? Yeah, it takes a little while because
one I really like. It was a semi-obscure title by Image. It was called The Mercenary Sea.
I've heard of that, but never read it.
And it was about a group of mercenaries in the South China Sea in the 30s that had a captured a German U-boat. And this was prior to World War II. Just ran and had a lot of adventures. The artist's name is, I'm friends with him on Facebook, and it's escaping me right now. It's Matt Reynolds.
Okay.
And his art style is very unique because it almost looks like 2D animation silhouettes.
Okay.
And that's not really doing justice to it, but his art looks fantastic. I mean, if somebody was going to adapt it into animation, it'd be perfect. It was just, it was a really nice pulpy story. And I think they published like 6 or 7 issues, and then they're like, yeah, we're going to come back and have a volume 2, and that never happened. And I was like, damn it. So, but I really love that one. The other one I like a lot is not obscure at all, but it's The Amazing Screw-On Head by Mike Mignola.
Okay.
It is almost a textbook example of perfection in terms of writing a comic and incorporating timing into the writing.
Okay. I've never read that one.
Oh, it's fantastic. There's also an animated version which Mike still claims his day that he's never watched. But whoever did the animation really got his art style down pat.
I think his art style would be fairly easy to animate because it's so refined.
Parts of it are, but then again, parts of it would be hard to do. Like he has, like, you know, the way he slopes his character's shoulders. I can see where through doing certain movements that would make it hard to animate.
Yeah, but those animation guys are really good at capturing style.
Yeah, if you get the right people doing it,
and he's got a very distinct style.
Yes.
So I think they're good at picking up the little things that make up style.
And David Hyde Pierce voiced the Emperor Zombie character, and it's just fantastic. Two others I'd have to think about.
Yeah, it took me a while to think of these ones because it's like, you know, I think of things now, but I know, like, especially people on YouTube who watch them.
Right.
Like, you know, Sakio Jimbo, I could pick.
Sure. Yeah, I love Sakio Jimbo too.
Right. But I know a few people via YouTube who, like, you know, even Savage Dragon I could pick. But I don't like Savage Dragon better than my friend Chris Jeruso. I know that. That's his favorite for years.
Probably Gru better than most people I know.
Yeah. Stray Bullets. But, you know, who is it? There's people who love Stray Bullets. I was just talking with...
even if you try to go off the grid, you're always going to find things that are
one outlier.
There are a few people that you know that
right, really like that you've shared that with, but like I said, that's why I had to go deep for these ones. Matter of fact, I got one from 2017, one from 1984. One and I think two from 2000. Well, this one is really from 1990 something, and this one would be 2001. So I had to go like 10 years apart.
Yeah.
What was that?
So you've got 4 decades covered there.
Yeah. I had to really spread it out.
I can't think of 4 off the top of my head either, but I got 2. One's Frank Capra. I mentioned it when I showed that FM book with the Spanish authors, and Frank Capra is also a Spanish comic, and it's kind of I've described it to people as Hugo Pratt for adults, because the Corto Maltese series has a certain dreamlike quality to it, and Frank Capra by Manfred Sommer is rough. The art is rougher. The story is rougher. There are more consequences. It deals more with reality, but it's not widely known. Manfred Sommer loses by virtue of being Spanish to Hugo Pratt, because the Spaniards didn't really make it into the collective psyche of the European format like Hugo Pratt has. There are very few who've done that. Maybe Vicente Segreles for doing The Mercenary, but yeah, the Spaniards don't have that industry that allows them to do that, and so he loses to Hugo Pratt. He loses to Milo Manara, who also has a similar style. I'm actually one of the few people on the planet who think that Milo Manara is better than Hugo Pratt, and Manara studied under Pratt. And the other, to me, is Danger Girl by J. Scott Campbell. The first time I read it, this is going to be stupid, because the cliffhanger comics were supposed to be stupidly. They were like the new Image, the artists doing their own comics. But Campbell recognizes that he's not a writer, so we found someone to write the comic with. And it's surprisingly honest. I mean, that thing manages to straddle the border between ripoff and parody very well.
Okay.
Gotcha.
That was a surprise. I've never heard anyone praise Danger Girl.
Yeah, but it is, you know,
like the art. You know, like
you look at it and it's obvious that that it's ripping off Charlie's Angels and James Bond.
Yeah, right.
But they do it. Scott Campbell does it in such a fun way. It's really a fun story to read. If you're not looking for something that's very brainy and it's got explosions and action and women with big breasts. Yeah, I mean, what else do you want from a spy parody?
It tickles your fun.
Yeah,
center. That's cool. And yes, Terrence, he was talking about Scott was talking about Amazing Screw-On Head.
Yeah. I said that he made a typo there, and I told him I
know.
Mongolian edition.
Autocorrect got him.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. You're just talking about doing the comics that you like better than anybody else. I can think of a movie and something you just said just popped that into my head that I love better than anybody else on this planet, and that's Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow. I mean, it's got spaceships, it's got rockets, it's got a flying aircraft carrier, it's got dinosaurs, it's got Angelina Jolie in a black leather suit. What else do you need?
Yeah.
And Comic Crack, his 4 faves for the tag were all undergrounds. He'd probably have an easy time with this list only because he's digging up comics no one's seen in 50 years. Where there's all that underground collecting he's doing. It's like, wow. It's funny, the undergrounds passed me right. I was just as I was, well, I would have never gotten them. I was too young anyway, but it's like the undergrounds ended just like they ended kind of in the late 70s, just when I was a kid buying comics. So if there were like, if undergrounds were like available at comic shops in like 1982, I may have gotten into them, but they were just over by then.
Yeah, or they weren't, racked out where you could see them along with all the other comics.
Yeah. But even so, I don't even think most early comic shop. I don't think most comic shops in 1982 had any undergrounds because they used to go through head shops.
The first underground that I got exposed to was when I was in college was Cheech Wizard.
Yeah,
they may have been easier to get in California or something.
Yeah. Well, they used to distribute the underground comics through head shops, which were drug paraphernalia shops. You couldn't sell drugs, but you could sell pipes and bongs and whatever else. But then sometime in the mid to late 70s, they passed laws outlawing head shops. So underground comics lost their distribution network and were gone forever.
I know that at least in California, Beer Bohm took them up. So I don't know if that happened in New York.
Imagine Dennis Kitchen may have known a lot.
I imagine there was some
person to talk to about that sort of thing.
I imagine there were some comic shops that had underground comics, maybe even some that specialized in them.
I hope Beer Bomb gets his book published before we all die.
I know.
No, it's going to be before we all.
I'm looking forward to that book. I really am. Yeah. It's going to be interesting.
When the guy says that all of a sudden he has 800 pages and he still hasn't reached 1938.
Right.
Yeah. In the late 70s, you weren't getting to the cream of the crop of the undergrounds either. Yeah, that's probably because they were making less and less money and they just weren't dead yet in the late 70s. Kind of the Weasley, stop up an indie dope comic. That would be if you could get your weed comics into weed stores, you'll be sitting pretty.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to I don't know.
They get Fat Freddy's cat going on. It could be everywhere. Yeah. The Furry Freak Brothers was another one I got introduced to back when I was in college.
Well, if my shop had a box of Undergrounds behind the counter in 1982, I didn't know how to ask.
Right.
But I was just 16 then, so.
Yeah.
But I was buying all the indie comics that were in front of the counter.
Probably, I could be wrong, but I would imagine most of the ones that you would have seen in mainstream comic stores probably came from Ripoff Press.
Yeah. You'd see all the Crumb stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Spain,
Zap,
all the biggest names.
Rodriguez, yeah.
But Dennis Kitchen had Jack Jackson.
That's right.
When did Larry Gonnick go mainstream, or is he not considered mainstream?
He is now, yeah.
Who is he? What does he do?
Larry Gonnick does the Cartoon Guide to the Universe, Cartoon Guide to U.S. History, Cartoon Guide to Physics. He's done a lot of different topics.
Yes, I do know those. Now, they're in like the graphic novel.
Right.
Yeah, because Gonnick is usually mentioned that as one of the big ones from the early underground movement, but everything I've seen of him is pretty normal. Right. Yeah, it's pretty normal. I mean, it's different from what the U.S. industry became, because the U.S. industry became too focused on superheroes.
That's interesting. Because
apart from that, is very normal. Is a funny cartoonist.
I haven't actually gone back and tried to look and see, what he had done prior to that. That's kind of interesting. You brought that up. Now I've got some homework to do now.
Oh, Terrence was digging through those. I wasn't digging through them until the late 80s, early 90s. Yeah, I imagine if your comic shop had underground comics in the late 80s, they were happy anyone was digging through the box.
Right.
Well, it depends. I imagine that with the Turtles becoming famous, what the shops wanted were new undergrounds. So the old ones probably were like going through the equivalent of Dell Comics.
Okay.
Yeah, Robert Crumb is the Dell Comics of underground comics.
It's an interesting way of looking at things.
And I'm going to have to dig. I probably still have a lot of random first issues from the black and white explosion era. Because, like I said, I was buying first issues of whatever was coming out, and most of it was crap, and never bought a thing. But I'm going to have to dig those out and see what some are.
I think that may have been the first time in human history that Robert Crumb and Dell have been fused together. Look for my classics illustrated version of Zap.
Actually, I wanted to go to France specifically to tell Robert Crumb, I compared you to Dell Comics. You said you were the Dell Comics of underground.
He's like, what the hell are you talking about?
In the late 80s.
Well, there are the way I see it, there are market conditions that allow me to do that reference. Although, of course, without context, that makes no sense. I know that.
Right.
But if there were with the new breed of undergrounds who were more direct descendant of superhero comics than they were of the 60s and 70s undergrounds.
Mm-hmm.
If they got anything from those, it's the sense of freedom in creating what you want. Right. But since the Turtles were clearly influenced by Marvel Comics, and also manga, but Marvel Comics, if new readers appeared who wanted to read indie comics, those old ones might not mean the same thing to them. And it's the same thing like people going through the back issue bins looking for old Marvels and DCs and seeing all those Dells and Charltons that at the time they were not as interesting to readers, I guess.
Right.
Speaking of old times, want to go through a little Lash LaRue?
Oh man, that was so boring. That is That is the most boring Western I've ever read, and I've
I
read
have
none
to
of
admit,
that.
I like that one a lot better than the Jungle Book that we did last week.
No. I prefer the Jungle Books.
I
it's
liked this
shafting.
Flash LaRue. What I find interesting though is they don't know anybody who worked on this.
Oh, so there's no credits at all.
There's there's no credits except for script Litwin. I think that's just a filler too.
Right.
But there's no script Rod Reed as S Signs and nothing.
Have you tried looking it up on DCDB?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I looked up on Grand Comic Book Database,
Right.
had nothing.
That's unusual.
Okay. Yeah, I was surprised to see that there was no information, especially since I found the Reed the best in comics. I'll look it up. This is Fawcett, by the way.
Right.
This is what 1951 Lash LaRue number 15, a random old comic we picked up.
Yeah,
it seems there's
people who Fawcett's historians are mostly concerned with Captain Marvel, and they don't pay attention. And they would not pay attention to a licensed Western.
But then there are guys that are really heavy into Western comics and nothing else too. So,
but if you notice up here, we get the executive editor, the editor, and the art editor all credited.
Well, sure.
But none of the people who actually did the comic.
Right.
And I have to say, this once again reinforced to me how bad the writing on that Jungle comic we read last week was. I thought the writing on this was solid.
It was one thing that struck me. If you were a younger reader, this was very easy to follow.
Yeah. I found everything was clear as day. The drawing was all clear as day. The storytelling was all clear as day. And the writing was all clear as day.
Except for the villain there that evidently got his suit, died at, from... went in the future and got his suit from like World War I or World War II. It's all olive drab.
But yeah, look at all those textures in there in the art. I like how they packaged the opium with opium, so we know what it was.
One thing that did bug me a little bit is they would have not used the term dope back then.
Yeah, right. I don't think they would have. I found that was very 1950. They also wouldn't have put opium labels on their opium.
But right.
No.
But I just remember the word dope sticking out like a sore thumb in comparison to everything else. But
Comic Crack is leaving us. Have a good one.
Okay, see you later.
Dope did stick out, but I found it funny too. I didn't realize like Lash LaRue was like a wandering freelance marshal or something. He just went from
what the hell is that supposed to be?
Much like Paladin.
Yeah, there's a scene here. He's putting the chest is empty, but he's putting it on the horse and galloping. Even an empty chest is bound to be a little heavy.
Yeah. I found this bottom panel extremely hysterical. Biff, sock, bam, pow. That's like the exact sound effects that Batman TV show.
Yeah, that's just getting to say that's the '66 Batman TV show right there.
But the action itself,
the same exact ones.
Yeah, but the action itself isn't very bad. This guy may have worked for the big two in the 1950s as well.
I found the action very clear. But it didn't make you feel the punches. Like I said, this was more for kids, I think. But still, it was written very good. And also the other plot thing I didn't like about it, I think there was two stories where he was just snuck up on from behind and hit in the head.
Yeah, why didn't the bad guy shoot him?
Or even, I mean, he's like this master fighter here, taking on 8 guys all the time. Well, you can just sneak up on him and hit him in the head. So it's kind of like that was a little incongruous, but
one thing I always noticed
about 8 pages, you can't. What was that?
One thing I always noticed about the old Superman show is you could fire all these bullets from a machine gun, they bounce off his chest, but if you threw a pistol at his head, he would duck.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Here we go. Right here, this guy just sneaks up behind him. He even has to come down those rickety wooden stairs and clonks him in the head.
Just shoot the guy. He's right there.
He has plot armor.
No. I can understand them not shooting him because they weren't killing anyone. they wanted to get away with this, so they didn't necessarily want to shoot someone. But then later on, they were like, "All right, we're not getting away with this. Let's just shoot people." So I didn't mind them not shooting him there, but it was like, come on.
They tied him up and threw his lash with him. Then they stick him in a room full of stuff like it's an episode of the A-Team.
Oh, so now you're making fun of the A-Team too.
Get me on the riverboat.
Yeah, it wasn't the most sophisticated story, but it was a well done one. I mean, especially compared to that the script in that jungle stuff we had.
No.
I mean, the script on this is solid.
Look at him. He can shoot. He can fire 3 shots, and all of them are able to disarm an individual.
That was a Western trope back in the days because they didn't actually want to kill anyone, so you'd shoot guns out of people's hands. You just have to accept that when you're reading or watching a movie or TV show from a certain era, that they're going to shoot the gun out of someone's hand. We know it's impossible. We know it's stupid, but they don't want them just killing people willy-nilly.
It's kind of like the G.I. Joe cartoon from the 80s or 90s. They had all this high-tech weaponry, but nobody ever got killed.
Right. Or the A-Team, where there was bullets flying all the time and no one got shot. Some goofy... I haven't found... By the way, on this quiz, I got it perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an easy one.
A little double bubble ad.
Mm-hmm.
This one was just goofy.
See, there's another one where you've got a yellow sky, and then 2 pounds underneath it, you got a red sky.
He cannot handle expressionistic color, can he? Especially when it comes to yellow.
The artist in the second story doesn't seem to be the same as the first story.
I don't think so, but he seems to be just as competent. Whoever he is, they're both solid storytellers.
Yeah, I've noticed some things that kind of look like Fawcett House style that could be used in Captain Marvel.
Okay, I haven't read enough Fawcett stuff to pick up on any house style.
No, at least from Captain Marvel, the way the guy in the way faces are drawn in the second story.
But you can see how they came up with a plot for this one too, because the whole story is based around a trick horse from a circus that you say "whoa" and it runs, and you say "giddy ap" and it stops.
And you can just see this being like a TV episode of a Western.
Yeah.
I mean, it really,
a story for the whole family, kind of thing. It's very much like a TV Western story. Well, I guess Lash LaRue was Lash LaRue a movie guy, or he was a movie guy, right?
Yeah, serial
guy. So that's like TV. And then, of course, a mistaken identity here, where they take the. But once again, lots of solid textures, and I actually like they got a sort of a Western color scheme going on here with all the sand and gray. Not a primary color superhero color scheme. Yeah, the guy keeps flying off his horse and knocking him out, and then not knocking him out.
The old guy gets thrown off the horse, lands on the other two, and gets up before the other two who are younger.
Right. Yeah, that's what I noticed too.
You can't dig into these ones too much. They're only 8-page stories, and I didn't read any of the text.
I didn't either.
You can get a Lash LaRue subscription. Look at that.
And in one of the ads, you can get an entire Lash LaRue ensemble.
That's some nice type work up there. Lash LaRue and the Patrol Marauders.
Mm-hmm.
So all the lettering work.
That stencil font that you see in a lot of World War II series, do you know if there's a name for that font?
There is. It's generally it's called stencil usually.
Okay.
Like that one right there, the military, the one they like spray paint. It's called stencil.
Okay, gotcha. That makes perfect sense.
He's combining. He's got a little Broadway font going on in that Marauders thing. But yeah, some nice type work in there too. All the everything on this is pretty solid.
And it looks like a different artist again.
Yeah, but same sort of style in terms of storytelling.
Kind of have to know. Yeah, here I kind of notice differences in the hair, the body language of the characters.
Mm-hmm. I should look at the hats too, compare and contrast.
Yeah, Lash and his horse, they need to be on type always.
And this is the first panel here I noticed that's sort of 1 point perspective. I didn't notice till right there that they've been avoiding that sort of flat 1 point perspective thing. So all the space is like 3-dimensional and not modernist sort of space. This right here is more of a modernist space, and everything else is like isometric 3/4. There's lots of depth in it. Even something like down here, which is almost a modernist space, except they put a lot of depth in this drawing right here. So it's interesting. This guy's doing something a little different than the other guys, but not much. But like I said, like look at the solid draftsmanship in all this leather. That's well done right there, and that horse too.
He has his name in the belt buckle.
What was that?
He has his name in the belt buckle.
Is his name in the belt buckle?
Yeah, see there, Lash.
Lash. That's probably in the TV show too, or the serials.
Could you get personalized belt buckles like that in the 1860s?
if you knew a metalsmith, I'm sure you
you could.
I guess everything was homemade then.
Pretty much.
So you had to know a guy who made belt buckles to even get a belt buckle. Otherwise, you used a rope to tie up your pants.
And then your name was Jethro.
Oh, look at that. Lash LaRue is currently playing in your local movie house. Outlaw Country, Son of Billy the Kid, Dead Man's Gold, Mark of the Lash, Frontier. I guess those are all the serials he did that year.
Yep.
Yeah, these guys worked around the clock doing new stuff for the movies.
Yeah, sure.
And this one is a much more cartoony style. I actually found this art refreshing after looking at the other stuff. I may not have liked it as much if they had put it first. Once again, solidly professional, but kind of goofy. Look at that guy. He's got a green hat. I bet Scott's going to complain about that. Green hat and green pants? Who wears green hat and green pants?
Mr. Green Jeans.
Mr. Green Jeans. Checkered vest? Who wears a checkered vest?
Oh, God, I can't even think of his name now. The guy that plays guitar for Cheap Trick, Rick Nielsen.
Some more Lash LaRue, the terrible Herd Brother Bandits. These Herd Brothers were too nasty.
I actually misread that at first and thought it was the Turd Brothers.
Because
I had to do a double take. I was like, oh, okay.
Well, this one kind of looks like, I think it's the same artist as the first one.
Okay.
Could be.
Yeah, because that's very distinct body language there, the way he's holding that gun. I'll have to check the first one and see if anyone's holding guns like that.
I usually look at the faces, but because I'm not really that good at noticing body language. I sometimes notice it, but I'm really not that good at it. It's not the first thing that pops to mind.
Right. But I have to say, these Herd Brothers were probably the nastiest villains of the piece, too.
The toughest, meanest hombres.
Yeah. Some nice... Once again, this issue, like I said, it really impressed me with its solidness. I'm not telling you it was great.
It's clear, yeah.
That little there looks like a publicity still.
But yeah, that's true. It really does.
Must have had a little reference on that.
That's an 8x10 shrunken down.
Yeah. See, and certain artists did stuff like this all the time. They wanted to show off that they could draw hands. So you'll often see a face with like a hand gesture in it.
Wow.
I'll have to look and see if someone else but I always notice that because I'm always like, there's no need for that hand to be in there. But sometimes artists just want to show off they can draw hands.
I call it Rodin syndrome.
It's shorthand for facial expressions that can express everything.
Right. Drink chloroform.
Yeah.
That looks like an ad.
It's good for you.
It's like drink Ovaltine.
Yeah.
Ovaltine. Son of a bitch.
Chloroform is like an all-purpose plot device, too.
So is geez, I'm getting old. I can't think of it.
But I like the fumes on this page, even the sort of modern art aspect of those fumes.
Right.
The magenta again and the white and the black. It's okay the fumes are magenta, right, Scott?
That doesn't really bother me.
If they were yellow, it would probably bother me.
If everything was yellow, that would bother me.
And look at all this Lash LaRue.
I was going to say, there's the ensemble I was talking about earlier.
Yeah. That Lash LaRue gear. You can even get his whip.
Mm-hmm.
This was just a bizarre little comedy thing.
There was actually one line in there that made me laugh out loud. It was talking about the back of the suit there.
Sure. That's quite a bit of gathering in the front, see? Yeah. That's quite a crowd in the back, too. Gulp.
And it sounds like a Fred Sanford line. It really does.
This story actually amused me. I was okay with it. But yeah, there we go. There's a little... That was our random old comic of the week. A little Lash LaRue. So I'm not sure. Like this one to me, reading this really emphasized how bad the writing of that Jungle comic, how bad the script was. Mm-hmm. I mean, I found the script on this perfectly okay. The script on that Jungle comic was just unreadable. It was like written by people who had never written anything in their life. It was a little strange.
Yeah, at this stage in comics, you had a bunch of artists showing how proficient they are, and a bunch of writers trying
how
to
non-proficient they are.
Yeah, that's the thing, because the writers all wanted to do something else, and they're expecting to be noticed with this crap that they're doing. Yeah, they're going to pay money on the pulp magazines with that comic book writing.
In 51, I'd have to say they probably weren't even wanting to get noticed. They were doing it just for the check, because by that time, comic books were starting to get their bad reputation. Or I think they already had it in 51, maybe.
Yeah.
So if you told... telling people you worked in comics in the early 50s was the equivalent to telling them you were a pornographer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, Stan Lee. There's a story about Stan Lee in the Sean Howe book. Because was at a party and some guy said, well, what do you do? I work in magazines. Well, what sort of magazines? This and that. The guy kept pestering him until he said, oh, I do comic books. What? And then he kept going after him to tell him how bad he was as a person for working in comics.
Right, that was real. Like in that 10-cent Plague book, it tells how everybody was so poor. No one would say they worked in comic books because you would just get treated like you were a pornographer, or I should say they said a child pornographer even. So it's like, whew.
Or it's like being a superhero artist and getting interviewed by a comics journal in the 80s. Probably shouldn't say which book I'm working on.
Are you reading some old comics journals?
I have a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I gave away all my comics journals, but I think I have them digitally, just from picking them up randomly around the internet.
A couple of years ago, Craig Russell put a post on Facebook that he had thrown out a whole bunch of magazines, and if anybody knew, he would just give them away to him. I was like, man, you're killing me here, man. He just threw like Comics Journal and different magazines. Like, yeah, I would have picked those up. I'd have paid for shipping on those.
If you just put out an ad saying P. Craig Russell sells assorted collection of magazines about comics, there will be 500 people showing interest in buying it from him.
That's like, I wish I had saved so much more stuff from my Marvel days than I did.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like specifically, like we used to get my job used to be, before things were digital, we'd have to paste the balloons down on the page. It was the way it worked was the way a comic book is supposed to be made is, and this is the pre-digital days.
Yeah.
The writer writes it, the penciler draws it, then it goes to the letterer, who letters it from the script of the writer, and then it goes to the inker, who inks it, and then copies go to the colorist, who colors it. What they would do to save time was, when the penciler was finished with a page, they'd photocopy it, send that to the letterer, and send the page to the inker. And the inker would have to ink the page without any lettering on it. The letterer would have to letter using a vellum, which is a heavy tracing paper overlay. Right. So he'd be inking right on the vellum, not on the original art. Then when those would both come back into the office, we in the bullpen would have to take the vellum, white out the back of it, put glue on it, and glue it on the original page. That's what you see when you see pages from the 80s and 90s with glued down balloons on it, because that was the process. And nowadays, the glue can now fall off and turn the original art brown, which is always bad.
Did you ever run into a situation where you get the art back and the vellum had been damaged?
Sometimes the vellum was some accidents would happen and we'd have to fix them. And what I find interesting too, I only found this out recently, is that DC never pasted down the vellum lettering. Mm-hmm. They always made a photostat of the vellum lettering and pasted down the photostat, and then sent the letterer back his original vellum overlay. I never knew that, and which is why, because Marvel didn't have a stat guy as soon as they went digital, but DC did for years afterwards, because he was still statting all the lettering.
I used to have an original Sandman page, and it always interested me because Todd Klein's lettering, because every time that Morpheus would speak, it was white letters on a black bubble. Okay? Oh yeah, and it had that was pasted on the artwork, and it was on there. It wasn't coming off, but it was just interesting to me to see that. Yeah.
That was always a stat. Well, what would happen was the letterer would letter it right, black on white, and then send it to the stat room, and they could reverse it in the stat room.
Right.
Make it white lettering on black, and then you'd paste down the stat. That's why that was probably always a stat. And it was DC was usually always a stat too. Yeah. But
it was interesting.
Which meant for every page we got pasted up, we got a photocopy of the pencils. Mm-hmm. I saved maybe a few dozen pencil photocopies I wish I'd saved more of it now, because it's but it was every day for us, there'd be more and more stuff coming through. Sure. So if you were to save every photocopy of pencils you got, it would overwhelm you. But now I'm sitting going, I wish I had saved something because, you can't see that stuff anymore. Maybe the penciler. See, I don't even know. The penciler, this is before photocopiers were. So I don't even know if the pencilers archived their own pencils. Because it's like they'd send the pencils into the office and they'd photocopy them at the office, I think. So it's like all this stuff is gone.
J. Kirby did. He saved photocopies.
He always did.
You could have saved some, but it would never occur to you because let's think of this mathematically. Let's imagine that you bring home 10 photocopies per day. And by the end of the year, you have 3,000 pages. And where are you going to put 3,000 pages of photocopied art?
Exactly. Hold on, let me show you another thing. Let me go over to my original art file, see if I can find this for you. I wish I had saved more of these. Oh, I'm going to have to pull the whole thing down. Whoa, don't fall. Ah. This is how much original art I have in my collection, but we'll go over that some other time. I just have random pieces from here and there that I've collected. Nothing particularly impressive. I wanted to show you one bit of ephemera that I did save. Do you know who Rick Parker is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Longtime letterer, also drew Beavis and Butthead. He used to do a lot. Here we go. He used to do a lot of lettering for Marvel in the early 90s. It was all on vellum overlays. I'll show you this too. It was all on vellum overlays. And he used to do, let me see if I can pull him out to get the glare. He used to do these cartoons on the vellum overlays. Mm-hmm. Please center title. And sometimes there'd be instructions. Sometimes he'd just make little art out of the page numbers.
Right.
And he must have done hundreds and hundreds of these. I only saved a few that I just saved a few that I cut out and put down. And it was like, I wish I'd saved more of these because once again, it's something that's just gone now.
Did you ever show those to him years later?
Yes, I've showed them to him years later. He was happy to see them and that I saved some of them. But it was like, he was doing, and I guess he'd just, take a break from a page and do a little cartoon. I love this guy here. What is it? That pointer is sharp, and it's a little guy with the blood on his thumb. And it was just all goofy stuff like that he did, day after day as he was lettering. And I wish I had saved more. I know some other people saved a thing here and there like I did, but I wish I had saved more of that. Because that's stuff that deserves to be saved. Actually, let me find one other I'll tell you about. Oh. Looks like I saved 2 pages of it. Here are a few more. Look at these are just page numbers. He was writing there's an 8. There's a 16. There's a 9 he made into a steak.
Right.
There's a 2. I think these are some of the more elaborate ones he did too. That's probably why I saved them. But it was like, it's ephemera like that just disappears into the ether.
Sure.
And the stuff that used to my one John Romita piece. I've told the story before on my channel. I don't know if I told it to you guys. Let me see if I can find that one John Romita piece. Where'd it go? Don't Don't make me pull everything down again. There we go. This comes with it was 1992, and at one point, Marvel used to be on the 10th floor of 387 Park Avenue South, and at one time they were redoing the floor, so we all had to move down to the 4th floor while they redid our floor. And at one time, we're all crowded down on the 4th floor. And at one time, I had to go into John Romita's office for some reason. I don't remember what I was talking to him about. I'm talking to him about something. And I see him pick up this piece of artwork that's on his desk and throw it into the garbage. And I went, it's like I couldn't even help myself. And usually I don't, I don't geek out over things like when you're working there. But I went, you don't want that? Can I have that? And he looked at me like I had 3 heads and went, sure, here, you can have it. And it's just this right here. Let me pull it out of its. Which was him testing artboard. They used to have to make they had to make Strathmore worked with Marvel to get special board made so the inkers and pencilers would be happy. You can see there, he's just writing Speedball, which is the type of pen.
Right.
He's going at it with pens and pencils.
Yeah.
He's got some water techniques down here. There's his water technique. And he just kind of drew these 2 really nice faces. And he even, like I said, this was in 1992. He threw this away. And you can see it's dated there, 1990. Plaza Strathmore. That's where the paper came from.
Right.
And so he must have had this around his office for about 2 years just sitting there. So he was throwing it out since he just moved offices and he was clearing stuff out. And I've had it ever since. But like stuff like this just disappears. I imagine John Romita threw a lot of stuff out. And now in the early 2000s, Corey Settlemyer was putting together the John Romita Visionaries book. And he was looking for stuff to put in the back. So I gave him a scan of this. And you can now find this in the John Romita Visionaries book.
That's cool.
But it's just like, it's the ephemera that it's like, I wish I had more of, now 30 years later.
Sure.
That's like, wow. But like you said, at the time, you're just going to be overwhelmed by it.
Right.
How many photocopies can you take home with you before, like I said, in a year, you've got 3,000 pages of photocopies. And you're like, well, what am I supposed to do now?
Mm-hmm.
There was several years ago, about 4 years ago at Heroes Con, there is a fellow that owns a comic shop in Greensboro, North Carolina. His name is John Hitchcock. And over the years, he had corresponded with Alex Toth.
Mm-hmm.
William Stout was there that year, and I was talking to Bill, and John comes up and he brings several like giant 3-ring binders, puts them in front of Bill and said, here's correspondence I've had with Alex, and you can look at it. All of it gorgeously illustrated. Of course, Toth always had this very unique hand lettering he would do in his personal letters to people.
I always found that hard to read.
Bill's looking through this, and Bill's jaw hits the floor.
Yeah.
And because John has made at least one book of material like that, and here's enough material for like 4 or 5 other books. And Bill's amazing. Like, oh my God. And you got to make another book of this stuff, It was just looking through it. It would floor you, Seeing all these little ancillary, little cartoon doodles and whatnot is fantastic.
I've got one random Alex Toth sketch page that I bought off of eBay. There's a guy who must have gotten his hands on a couple Alex Toth sketchbooks and just broke them up and sold them page by page. And I've got one of those pages. It's pretty cool.
I've also seen some people at conventions that have themed books that they will have people do sketches in, and some of those should be published. They can't, but some of them should. I know there's a guy that has one his theme is food items. So I have, all kinds of different. Dave Johnson did a really cool one that was a robot that had a martini olive that was in like a glass domed head, and that was fantastic. But there's people that do these semi-obscure themes. Is like some of them are really cool, but you'll never get to see them unless you see these people at conventions.
Yeah. Another thing I wish I could have saved. Paul Becton was a staff colorist at Marvel all through the 80s and into all through the 80s and maybe halfway through the 90s. He was there maybe 15, 20 years. Uh-huh. He was there when I was there in the early 80s. Once again, pre-digital days when they used to do things as color guides.
Right.
And matter of fact, let me show you what a color guide looks like. I have one here. I'll tell you the story behind this one too. Here is a color guide. It doesn't have the numbers on it. Where you take a photocopy of the original art. It's shot down to comic size, and the colorist usually takes Dr. Martin's dyes and paints in all the colors. And then he usually writes in the codes too. And Paul Becton was the in-house one of the two in-house colorists. This is by George Roussos, who was the second one. And this is probably like 1992 or so. And Paul also used to color a lot of Marvel comics, the interiors, freelance-wise. So he had a lot of coloring work. And like I said, it was all done on photocopies of photocopy. Well, they'd actually put like a special, it wasn't just regular photocopy paper. They'd put like this little thicker paper that was better at handling watercolor.
Right.
And of course, they used to get that returned to them too, as originals. So one day I just happened to be there over at Paul's desk when the art returns guy handed him a stack about 4 inches thick of the pages he had colored. Mm-hmm. And he was like, he just took them and dropped them in the garbage.
Wow.
Threw them away. Yeah. Because at that time, no one cared about the color guides. There was nothing he could do. Like he'd be overwhelmed by color guides if he kept them. He did that. He was coloring 3 books a month for Marvel. So that's 60 pages a month at least of color guides that nobody wanted. You couldn't sell. So he just threw them away. And I saw him throw them away. I was just like, and he's like, no one wants, nothing I can do with them. And I was, and I should have taken them.
Right.
At least some of them. But, especially now Paul has ended, he's not been well in his post-Marvel years didn't treat him well. And he could really use the money from those color guides too. Because you can get $20 to $50 a piece for color guides now. 1 page.
I remember Danny Vazzo, he was a colorist at DC. He colored a lot of the early Sandman stuff. I saw him at a convention once. He had a bunch of color guides with him.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to see that.
It was just a shame that Paul threw all his away. It was kind of like,
if we all just had a time machine. Yeah.
Right. But this one this is George Roussos. And I know this is his too because he mounted it. George Roussos used to always cut out his photocopy and paste it down on a board kind of too. Or I think I pasted this down on a different board even. But he used to cut it out and paste it down on a board so he'd have no edges and he wouldn't have it. But George was, what year did he died? He was still working at Marvel in his 70s. Mm-hmm. He actually worked on the first issue of Batman. Not Detective Comics 27, but Batman #1. He was the background artist. As a matter of fact, it was in this. Where is my Batman book? Somewhere is my Batman book. Dark Knight. There we go. I had this for years before I discovered this. Dark Knight I just happen to have this random Dark Knight hardcover, and I've kept it all these years because in the beginning is an interview with George. It was a little interview with George Russos. Here we go.
And we only know that.
JDGR.
Yeah, we only know that now because there are art spotters specialized in Golden Age books who go through all of that to find out that Bob Kane drew jack shit.
Yeah. Well, and here's an interview with George Russos from the early 90s. That was really cool. And I didn't know George Russos did the background inks on most of this stuff. And he's famous for, I didn't realize he was famous in Batman lore for these big moons. He was the guy, the penciler would just indicate a moon, and he would always make the moons bigger in the background to make them sort of a more of a design device. And that's what he's famous. That's one of the things he's famous for, is making big moons in the background of the earliest Batman stuff. So he was still working at Marvel in the early 90s, doing the color covering. I think he died in like 96, 97 at like still working there. He died like on the week. He didn't even quit and die. He died as he was still working there. Lived on Long Island. But I think I must have, because I found this amongst my stuff one day. And I was like, where did this come from? What is it? Because it's not like I was stealing original art or anything. It's funny because I've heard stories.
I've heard some interesting stories.
Well, nobody in the bullpen at Marvel ever stole art. It just didn't happen in the night when I was. It just didn't. But I've heard stories from my friend who worked at DC too, that they stole. There was original art stealing going on all through the 90s at DC. But at Marvel, that never happened. No one was. People, it just never. That's just not what the people were like there. It never occurred to anyone to steal art. So things weren't being stolen, except for one case when there was an actual art thief stealing. That's a whole other thing. They caught that guy though. But like there wasn't like casual stealing of artwork like there was at DC, I'm told, in the 90s. So I'm like, well, where did this come from? And then I realized it was after George died and they cleaned out his desk. For some reason, this was left behind. So I took it just because it was the one thing left behind of George after he died. And I don't know if it was how long it was lying around, but I think it's an Ultimate Spider-Man cover. It's just the original, his original colors from a cover. I'll have to look up. I have written down what issue it is. Matter of fact, do I have it on the back of this? Let me see. Nope. And you can see there's the glue marks on this. So it was originally glued on another piece of paper. I'm going to have to write it down on the back of this mounting board because I thought I had it there, but I don't. But it's like Spider-Man Unlimited number 11 or something like that. Tom Lyle drawing.
Tom Lyle used to live down a couple hours from where I live right now.
Well, I said one of my original art pieces I have lying around. I actually bought the original art from a backup story in Iraq off of eBay years ago too. So I have the color guide. So I have another set of color guides back there somewhere that I bought for dirt cheap off of eBay because who wants the color guides from a Iraq backup story?
I think I remember that story. Wasn't it the one where they kill most of the members of Freedom Force?
No, I think it was Iraq, Son of Thunder, and I think it was Aryan.
Iraq.
A-R-A-K.
Oh, that Iraq, yeah.
That Iraq. Mm-hmm. The comic that was one of the most boring ever. Okay, let's see. Let me see if I know what issue it is. Actually, I also like I like to keep. There it is. I don't usually frame my art. I like to keep it in Mylar so I can pick it up and look at it. And I also mount, like something like this, I mount on Bristol board. But this is I think. Oh, it's a Viking prince story. So it's a Viking prince story from the back. Let me take it out of here. A Viking prince story from a backup of Iraq. Son of Thunder number 3 or 4 or something. Let's see, does it say? Iraq 9. And you can see here, this is what they usually did. Those are color codes, these numbers written down here. Whoops. These numbers are color codes. So the color separator knows exactly what color to put there. Like, that green is YB. So that's 100% yellow, 100% blue, I think. Oh, YB3 is this other green. So it's YB is the first value. So that's the lightest green. YB3 is a darker green. So they had their own codes. R3, B2 is like I think you only had like 3 values of red you could use.
Sounds
so
like an astromech droid.
So it's like they have all these YB, R2. So those
you
were
had to memorize Pantone.
Yeah.
Nope, no, Pantone is expensive. No Pantone. Pantone is outside the CMYK process. You could not use Pantones in comics.
I think we had. Yeah, I remember seeing Pantone guides back in the publisher I worked for the magazines. Yeah.
Mr. Gretzky's back. Yeah, they're Pantones are used a lot in T-shirts.
A friend of mine put up a graphic where the sky out in San Francisco a few days ago was orange, and they matched it to a very specific Pantone color code.
Yeah. Like I said, there are certain industries that, like, I had a friend who worked in like children's apparel T-shirt design. He colored everything in Pantones. I think because they use some kind of Pantone inks to print in the T-shirt design. Because I'm in the CMYK world of printing, so we hardly ever use Pantones. That's a fifth ink specialty, which they used to do in the 90s.
Well, it's like some books. Sin City used to do this sometimes. Would be preliminary black and white, but you have one other color like red or yellow. That was the only one that was used.
Vivatone. Yeah, those are dual shade. Because when you can usually that too, you can photocopy one color.
Okay.
I think they used to do that where you could actually take out the black toner cartridge and put in a blue toner cartridge. So if you wanted your ash can to stand out a little bit, you could print it in all blue kind of thing.
Gotcha.
I remember seeing some people do that. Most just printed it with the black toner cartridge.
How long is it going to be now before they bring back ash cans as a hot thing again and then do all those with variant covers?
Did you see what Ed Piskor was doing on his Cartoonist Kayfabe channel?
No, I haven't. I've gotten way behind on that.
Yeah, I only watch certain ones that I like. But since he's got a new comic coming out, I think he said on his Patreon he put high res files of it, so you can make your own bootleg mini of it if you want. And he's like, if you do, send me a copy. Yeah. So he had a couple of mini comic copies that people need of his new book coming out. I thought those were pretty interesting little promotional item.
I can't
Make
remember.
your own bootleg.
Yeah, I can't remember the creator's name off the top of my head now, but he would sell little mimeograph mini comics like that at conventions, and he did The Amazing Cynical Man, and I can't think of his name.
Oh yes, Matt Feazell.
Yeah, Matt Feazell.
Yeah.
I always liked seeing the stuff that he did.
I used to do some mini comics back in the matter of fact, I made almost a mini comic, a mini art book recently. Just because I wanted to make a book and I hadn't made one in a while. And I used my dreams and I just took a bunch of the art I've been doing, put a little cartoon in the front and back, and just made a little mini book and And it's like I went and found. I made this all on my printer too, my inkjet printer, so that I went out and found like a cover stock for it. Even like so my cover stock is thicker than my interior page. It was like I was making a real book when I was making this.
Right.
'Cause I used to make mini comics in the 90s. But it was like, you know what? I just felt like me. And I made about 5 or 6 copies of it and then went, now I made a book. Cool. Now what do I do with it? I just let it sit here. But it's more effort than you think to make one of those. It really is.
Yeah.
You got to fold it and staple it yourself. I want to see what a mini comic stapler looks like? Hold on. I've had this since the 90s. Where is it?
Is this from Office Space?
Nope.
No red swing line stapler down in the basement.
This is a 12-inch long reach stapler. So that it's a regular old stapler right there. Put on this long, so that you can get all your, you can staple. Your piece of paper can go all the way in there, so you can get it right in the middle. Because otherwise,
I see what you mean.
if your stapler only reaches to there, and you have to get all the way into the middle to there, you're out of luck. You have to crumple up your paper to get it there. So if you wanted to make mini comics and be fancy, you needed a long reach stapler. I've had this one since about 1993 or something. And it's been in the same spot since then too, so I know right where it is. So I wonder what happened to Tim, who was supposed to be showing up at 7.
Hard to tell. With the type of job he has, he can be like, on call kind of a thing too. So
yeah. Right. Whoops. Friar Tuck says, just don't sell it and make money off it. I think that he means the Ed Piskor comic. If you can, I'm sure if you could actually make money selling Ed Piskor mini comics, he'd be like, go for it. I don't know if those staplers were specially made for mini comics. I am not sure. I just know when I started making mini comics, somebody told me to get one. I don't know what other uses a long reach stapler would have besides your own self-published stuff, even if it wasn't mini comics.
Yeah, I was thinking it's just be designed for the self-published market, not necessarily.
Yeah. I don't know what others
say.
Yeah.
People doing.
I don't know how big the self-published market in 1992 was outside of maybe chapbook. Weren't chapbooks a thing?
Chapbooks have been around since like the 1800s, though.
Right. So I imagine if you're making your own chapbooks, which were just little books of poetry or writing or something, that are kind of like mini comics.
Yeah.
I imagine you need a long reach stapler for one of those too. So. But I haven't seen one of those in a
some of the prices on self-made fanzines that were done, especially science fiction fantasy fanzines that were done in the 50s and 60s. Some of the prices on those are just absolutely nuts.
You mean what they're going for now for collectors?
Yeah, you're talking like tens of thousands of dollars in some cases.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, if you had like something obscure that had a big name in it, if you got a hold of a Ray Bradbury story, Isaac Asimov, whatever, you're talking like big dollars.
Wow. Yeah, I've never seen any of those, but I haven't been reading much science fiction in a long, long time. So.
Yeah, the only people as hardcore with collecting, or maybe more so than comics people, are science fiction people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. All the little areas of geekdom have their hardcore people. So.
Yes, indeed. Thousands of little kingdoms with their little kings.
Yeah. Including gaming dice.
What was that?
Including gaming dice.
I'm just an accumulator of dice, though, not a collector.
Yeah.
Oh, I sent Jared a link for this. Just on Instagram alone, there are literally hundreds of different people now that are making custom dice.
Yeah.
And back when I first started playing role-playing games back in the 80s, I was like, man, I wish we'd have had stuff like that back then. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, what it is, I think it's I have a cousin whose name you can find in the credits of Thor and a few other Marvel movies, because he makes he's a toy maker and he makes movie props too on occasion. So it's like he made like speaking of belt buckles, he made like the buckle on Thor's belt or something like that. Something like
Right.
you don't think someone's got to make that. Thor's in the.
Are you familiar with the replica?
Not only Lance LaRue has his own belts. What was that?
Are you familiar with the replica prop forum?
Yeah. Oh, not the forum. I just know it exists.
Well, that's a group of people. Adam Savage is a
Right.
member of that, and Steve
Oh,
Neal,
okay.
who did a lot of special effects for some very obscure movies like Laser Blast and things like that. He also did work on the first Star Trek movie. Made a belt buckle from Master and Commander for Adam for a cosplay that he had, and just the amount of work it went into it in terms of researching, how authentic. It's really interesting to see some of that, because I mean, they go into all kinds of gory detail about, what the metal was, what metal it actually would have been made from, how it was constructed, and it's really interesting.
They want it to be authentic.
Yeah.
But I think it was a lot of those guys who make toys, because they learn you can now make what's it made out of? What are those dice made out of? I can't remember the material anymore.
A lot of them are made of resin right now.
Yeah, resin. Yeah, that's it. So a lot of them, make resin dice because they have the resin. They make all sorts of other toys.
Right.
So dice, I guess, are easy compared to
Yeah, once you make a master mold, then you're pretty much set in business.
Right. So I think that's why there's so many dice people out now, because there's so many resin. Toy making has become its own thing.
Yeah. Well, see, it's even going to get even more prolific with 3D printing now too.
What do you guys recommend that is recent comic-wise? I might be the only one buying recent comics.
Well, you and I both say the same thing. We both say Usagi Yojimbo.
Let me look at my. Let me read off my list here. I have. I actually publish a blog at radiantcomics.com where I publish and YouTube. I show off what comics I got, and I also write it down. Let's see, what have I been getting? Grendel, the Devil's Odyssey, Manifest Destiny. These are January books. What did I get? 5 years just ended, but I recommend anything by Terry Moore. He's going to be coming out with another one soon. Red Mother, I've been enjoying. Once and Future, I just showed the new one I got. Monstrous, I like. Outcast, of course, is just about ending. Kaiju Max is a good one. So is Usagi Yojimbo. What else do I got here? The Goon.
I was getting ready to say, even though I'm behind on it, I would definitely recommend The Goon.
Yeah, The Goon is good. White Ash I liked. That just ended after 5 issues, and there's going to be more. But White Ash was good. Walt Simonson's Ragnarok. The Breaking of Helheim just ended. That's a good one. Ragnarok. Reaver. That's we were just talking about that one earlier with one of the I forget who. Reaver's a good one.
The second Goddamn that was better than the first one.
Goddamned, you liked?
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't read Love and Rockets, of course.
I know you like Bitterroot a whole lot.
Oh man, here's the weeks the comic shop were closed. Yeah, Bitterroot I've been reading. The Boys, I just started reading The Boys too, the new version of it. Savage Dragon I read every month. What else we got here? There's Bitterroot, Red Muff, Savage Dragon, Once and Few. I think that's Birthright, which is just ending. You can get that one pretty much all in trade these days. But there's a quick list of the stuff I've been buying, all indie stuff. Yeah, Friday. He usually watches my weekly YouTube poll, but has been gotten behind. Yeah, I've been looking for some new stuff to buy, and the latest new thing that made my pull list was Big Girls. Jason Howard. I'll show you that one again.
That just sounds like a Robert Crumb title.
Yeah, it does. This one issue 2 just came out. You could probably find it fairly easily. Big Girls by Jason Howard, right? Jason Howard. Issue 2 improved on issue 1, so that's always a good sign. But I've been buying a lot of first issues that I haven't been buying second issues of. So it's kind of been a disappointing bit of a summer. What is it? Just jumping in here, resin is a prime material for scale models, much more detailed than plastic. Yeah, I think they make the dice out of resin, if I remember correctly. But
resin model kits can be very expensive too.
Yeah, but you can pour your own resin these days if you're a toy maker. And like I said, and my cousin being a toy maker and prop maker, I've certainly been plugged into a lot more of the idea that this whole toy making community exists. Who knew?
Right.
I did.
Oh, yeah, there's actually a show somewhere in California that's set up specifically for people that do one-off toys like that.
Yeah. There's Designers Con,
yeah,
which is in California, which is for toy designers, actually. And I know because my cousin and his now ex-wife used to run it.
Right.
That's like I think they still run it, but that was one of them. It's called Designers Con, but it was actually for toy designers, for small toy designers used to all go there. Then there's guys like
most model cars are made of resin now.
What was that?
Most model cars are made of resin now.
Oh, okay.
Because it's better for they used to be die-cast metal. There was a time when they were proud to make die-cast metal small cars, usually as toys. Right. But for the collectors, it's easier to paint on resin.
I think the stuff they get made too is in vinyl, and that has to go to China to get made because polyvinyl chloride is really dangerous to the environment, and we have actual laws here to stop people from ruining the environment with polyvinyl chloride, and China doesn't. So all the vinyl toys get made over in China. All those Funko Pops probably get made over in China. I think they're vinyl.
Somebody a few days ago, somebody posted on Facebook that Funko was going out of business, but it wasn't an actual. The trick they rickrolled everybody to click on this link, and I was like, it's like just to see all these comments because nobody read the article; they were just reacting to it. Everybody's like, no. Then you had the one guy that clicked on it, and he's like, "Damn it, you got me."
Nobody reads the article.
Yeah, let me go get my one single Funko Pop to see where it was made.
You have one more than I do.
I do not have any. I do not have any Funko Pops.
I was never a fan of that. There was a Japanese term for that sort of art style that was called super deformed.
Yeah, super deformed. I remember.
I was never a fan of that. I always wanted something that looked realistic.
I was never a fan of it either.
Is that Marvin?
No, this is
okay.
Skullboy.
Gotcha.
My fellow bullpenner, Jacob, and cartoonist Jacob Chabot has this cartoon. He has the Mighty Skullboy Army, which is really funny stuff. Gotcha. And Dark Horse has published some of it. Hold on, let me go over here to get it. Where is it?
My one single Funko Pop.
I'm a big fan of the Phantom.
The Phantom?
Yes.
You can tell he's European. He got the Phantom.
I love the Phantom.
Yeah, I got it for my birthday once. I was actually looking at, let me see now.
I'd like to be able to get all the Phantom stuff that comes out of Australia from Fruit Publishing, but there's a lot of it.
This is, like I said, my friend Jacob Chabot makes this, and it's actually really funny. It's the Mighty Skullboy Army, and this is Skullboy in the front, who's this little boy who has a skull for a head, and runs his international evil empire. And his two cohorts, are this monkey who doesn't speak and this robot over here, Funko, made in China.
Yep.
Made in China. There we go. It's vinyl. It's made in China.
Mm-hmm.
And
Kit Walker, the Ghost Who Walks.
it's a black and white comic, and like I said, Dark Horse put this out, and they're just funny little strips about, like I said, the monkey and the robot really aren't interested in conquering the world, and the monkey is basically chaos. You know, he just does whatever he wants as the robot tries to control him. And it's just a funny strip. And this, I don't know what I think I have the box buried somewhere. But this actually came out before Funko Pops. This was, like I said, they just used to kind of call these super deformed characters, and they put them out. It's a vinyl. I guess it'd be like a Funko Pop these days, but it predates Funko Pops. But it's a Mighty Skull Boy, so Dark Horse put it out. So I just bought it because it was fun. Oh, hold on, there's a year on it. 2007, Jacob Chabot copier. So this came out in 2007, and now he wears his Godzilla yarmulke, which I got. My friend was bar mitzvah last year and had a Godzilla themed bar mitzvah.
That's awesome.
So Skullboy now has a Godzilla yarmulke on.
I like that.
It works. Wow, I bought that in 2007. Time flies. Let's see when Volume 2 came out. The Mighty Skullboy Army. This was 2012. This came out. So if Dark Horse still has these in print, order one because they're good.
Dark Horse, boy, they have lost a lot of licenses in the past couple of years.
Well, that's because Disney owns everything now.
Yeah.
It's like they lost Star Wars because Disney owns it now, and Disney owns Marvel. They lost all the aliens because Disney owns it now, and Disney owns Marvel.
Conan.
So it's just like they lost Conan. I don't know why. You'd think they'd throw some money at Conan because.
Well, also, Stan Sakai pulled Usagi Yojimbo, went over to IDW with it.
Right. Because IDW is putting out in color and everything.
Right.
I'm sure
Eric Powell used to be with Dark Horse, but he pulled all this stuff and went back with Albatross.
Yeah, he's doing self-publishing again.
Which makes me wonder what the hell is going on over at Dark Horse other than all the stories we've heard over the past few years about Scott Alley.
Yeah, I don't know. I've heard stories of misbehavior, but I don't know if that has anything to do with them. It has nothing to do with them. It's nothing to do with them losing those licenses to Disney.
No.
But the only Dark Horse book I've bought in years was the Matt Kint book, Mind Management, and I think Department H were both Dark Horse. But other than that, Dark Horse doesn't publish much that I've bought.
Well, they used to for me because, like, a lot of the stuff I would buy wouldn't come out on a continual monthly basis. So I would always buy anything Hellboy, Concrete when it came out. You know.
Dark Horse didn't lose Star Wars before Disney got it. Disney let them know that they weren't renewing the license.
Right.
So they knew a year before they lost the license and Disney had already bought Star Wars.
But oddly enough, there's another company, I can't think which one it is now, that also has a Star Wars license as well, but it's not Marvel.
Yeah.
They
didn't. Terminator and Aliens. Marvel has Aliens. They're just putting out an Aliens omnibus. I don't know about Terminator.
And speaking of, both Steve Bissett and Mark A. Nelson posted about this. That the omnibus they're publishing, they're getting Greg Land to do the cover for.
Yeah,
and neither Mark nor Steve are getting any kind of royalties on any of that.
There's going to be an alternate Mark Nelson cover, but they don't get. But Dark Horse didn't pay anyone for their reprints either.
Right.
That just seems to be how those are working.
Right. But they were both. You could tell from their tone they were kind of pissed off about it.
Oh, I imagine so. All that work they did, they should get something.
Absolutely.
Which goes to how
somewhere.
Creative people.
I realize that publishing comics and Disney, Marvel is a business, but why can't somebody do the right thing?
Because it's not their job to do the right thing. That's what it comes down to. They don't care. They don't see any value in paying somebody a fair wage. There are very few companies that see value in paying their workers any kind of fair wage. They see value in taking as much money as they can out of the workers. That's just the way business works.
Oh, I know, but I'm just still leaves a bad taste in your mouth after a while.
Yeah, IDW has been licensing stuff from Marvel for like kids stuff. I don't know how or why that's working, but they've been doing like an Avengers kids book and a Spider-Man kids book. I think that's just because Disney doesn't care, doesn't bother, doesn't care, and Marvel doesn't care to do kids books that much either. As much as that's all I can figure out, because I was trying to figure out why those books exist. Have you seen them? IDW Avengers.
I've seen some of the covers, but I haven't actually seen the books themselves.
Yeah. They're not aimed at comic shop Avengers fans.
Right.
They're kind of aimed at kids, maybe bookshop fans. Sounds familiar. They don't care. I work for a smaller company that keeps telling my supervisor those same words. Yeah, they don't care. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. If not paying you a fair wage gets them an extra 10 grand a year, they're getting an extra 10 grand a year. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do about it? That's why unions are a good thing for people, and why everybody has spent a lot of big money has spent a lot of money in the last 40 years to kill unions in America.
Oh yeah.
And artists can never unionize because they're not in the same kind of business all the day. They tried to unionize in the 60s and DC just fired everyone, which is why a new wave of writers hit in the late 60s and early 70s at DC, especially because they fired all the writers who wanted to unionize. Or at least didn't hire them, because they're freelancers, they can just not hire them anymore.
Yeah, it's going to be fairly unpopular because they're unpopular for me to talk about this, but because the property is so popular right now. But Rick and Morty, there was a situation where they're trying to crank out episodes, and their animators, they had forced them to work overtime without paying them overtime rates. And the animators tried to unionize, and at least one of the creators of Rick and Morty, I don't know which of the two guys it was, came out with a statement basically paraphrasing. He's like, F the unions,
Yeah.
And that is one of the reasons I will not watch Rick and Morty.
That's...
I don't want to support somebody that thinks like that.
When you're powerful, you don't want to give up your power to a union.
Right.
That's just the way it is. Yeah. You just do your hours and you go home. No, me too. I've never worked at a union place anyway. Marvel was you do your hours and you go home. Yeah. You used to run white collar and blue collar as well. Yeah. There's usually no unions among white collar, but they're usually taken better care of, but that's not always the case. I learned about that stuff. I can remember my first job in high school. I was first a dishwasher and then an assistant cook at a public religious shrine. So, we would feed priests and we would feed whoever was on retreat, and we'd feed whoever. But one of the guys I used to work with was probably my age. I was probably in his 50s. And that's where I first learned that. And he used to work at a Ford auto plant.
Ford assembly.
Yeah, it was a good job. He worked at a Ford assembly plant.
Right.
But then everybody at the assembly plant started getting up near retirement age, so they closed the plant and moved it to Mexico. Yeah. And he was of course extremely bitter about that. And the union couldn't even do anything about that. And he even had a good union because they were just like, and he's like, well, a lot of us were getting ready to retire and they didn't want to pay our retirement.
Right.
So they just closed it. The whole plant. It was cheaper they thought it was a better idea to close the whole plant and move it to somewhere else than to pay these people who've been working for them for 20 years their retirement. And that's what you're dealing with businesses. Mighty Skull.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit earlier about, how creators, had been mistreated over the years, and there are a lot of parallels in the animation industry along with the comics industry.
Yeah, because you have to be creative, you have to work long hours.
Right.
And you don't own anything you do.
Right. And you have to kiss the hand that feeds you.
Right.
On a pretty regular
all those
basis.
Jobs are temporary too.
Right.
They're not staff jobs. A lot of those animation jobs. You got to pick it up by the show.
Right.
So if your boss doesn't want you for his next show, you're SOL. No fun. And I still like what Gil Kane said about the comic book companies too, is that you don't work for companies, you work for editors. So your job was to keep your editor happy. And if your editor quit, you were in trouble. Because your relationship was with that editor, who's the guy who gave you work.
If you were lucky, you'd go with the editor to the other company.
Right.
If you were lucky. If the guy went to a job at a meat packing plant, then you're shit out of the luck.
Yeah. There are a few union jobs where I work, but it's a weak union. They're slowly eliminating their positions and replacing them with non-union trade school people. Yeah, they don't. Yeah, eliminating, not illuminating. I got that by context.
Well, if he works in the lighting industry, then maybe so.
Yeah. Yeah, there are very few. That's why when I remember hearing that, I think it was maybe 10 years ago now, Ralph Macchio, the editor at Marvel Comics, and I heard he was retiring from Marvel Comics. And I was like, retiring? Nobody retires from Marvel Comics. You just get laid off at some point. It's like I never heard of an editor retiring from one. It's like all the 90s editors were fired. As we see from DC this week, almost everyone, a couple weeks ago, if you're an editor at a company, you usually get fired before you ever retire. Right. And I was like, retiring? Holy cow. That never happens. I didn't even know Marvel had any kind of retirement plan.
They probably didn't.
Yeah, they very well might not. Who knows?
Crisis on infinite pensions.
Yeah, how crazy is that? It's like I know both Virginia and John Romita retired from Marvel in '96. I don't remember anyone else retired. Like all those 90s guys who were there for a while got fired. If you're editor-in-chief, you're going to get fired. Tom Brevoort's been there forever. Maybe he'll get to retire. But no one else did.
Yeah, I think he's the only one left who can still retire.
Yeah, he might be. I recently saw a tweet where somebody was saying an assistant editor at Marvel tweeted something like, oh, they quit Marvel because there was no room for advancement at Marvel for, any kind of minority or female. And I was like, there's assistant editors have been quitting Marvel for 30 years because there's no room for advancement, no matter what their gender or color. Right. It's like they've especially underpaid assistant editors.
Actually, remember I asked something about interning at Marvel when I was 18 or 19. I asked about it in the news groups. And a guy from New York actually sent me to mail me a package with all the stuff that I needed. And basically, I would have to live in New York and work for free.
Yeah, that's what interns were like in Marvel. But that was the way a lot of people got jobs. But once again, you had to be able to work for free. Here's Macchio just saw the writing on the wall, perhaps just the opposite from what I heard. He was actually they were retiring, but then he was making this plan on coming in for a couple days a week, maybe to keep his hand in and still do something. And they told him, no, stay home. So I don't think he wanted to retire even, or if he did retire, he still wanted to make comics. And Marvel said, no, you're not making comics here anymore. So.
Yeah.
He was there.
Al Jaffe is the only guy that's got to retire on his own terms in a while.
He was like 90 and he just retired from that Mad fold-in, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think he retired on his own terms because they canceled Mad.
Well, technically, yeah, it's still ongoing right now, but it's mostly reprints.
It's all reprints.
Although one of the recent issues is an Al Jaffe special.
And
they're also, one of the other ones that's coming up is going to be a Sergio Aragonés special.
Oh, cool.
So
cool. I've heard stories from Mort Todd. Mort Todd worked at Marvel in the 90s editing the Marvel music line. Right. And he also was the editor, like right out of school. Right out of college, he was the editor for Cracked magazine in the early 80s. And he got Don Martin to go over to Cracked by returning his original artwork to him. So he got to work with a lot of those Mad guys over at Cracked.
Right.
Yeah, that is sad. Right. I was sad when I heard that Ralph still wanted to do some editing, but they wouldn't let him. So it was like, he was old Marvel. New Marvel wanted, Marvel of 2010, where Disney corporate Marvel especially wanted nothing to do with those old guys.
I've actually been catching up with the Rob Liefeld podcasts about Heroes Reborn.
Yeah,
and there's just listen to the part where he was talking about Jim Lee conspiring to take over Marvel, and then how Bill Jemas told Liefeld that I was the one who killed Jim Lee taking over.
And maybe there was a lot of people when Marvel was in bankruptcy. There were a lot. I don't know what time period that was. If it was the bankruptcy or post, because I don't think Bill Jemas could have killed anything until after. I haven't listened to that one yet.
Yeah, because Jemas was there, but he was in the Toy Division, and Jim Lee had been talking to Perlman, and the Toy Division was controlled by Avi Arad.
Okay.
And so Perlman, it was the Toy Division that won the fight for taking over the company.
Right. Once Ike got it, it was interesting. It was interesting because if Ike hadn't, and the judge just gave it to him too. It wasn't like there was any rationale behind it, as far as I can tell from reading the book Comic Wars, which was all about Marvel's bankruptcy. Because there was a whole bunch of Marvel's bankruptcy was historic, and that most bankruptcies last 3 or 4 months, and Marvel's lasted 20 months. And there was all sorts of people fighting to own Marvel Comics.
Right.
And one of the reasons Marvel Comics was in bankruptcy was because of the toys, where there was a guy at Marvel, I can't remember which vice president, a Perlman guy, who made the usually when you make toys, you get royalties for your toys. Instead of getting royalties, this guy made a deal where Marvel got Toy Biz stock. So all the upper up guys got, and Perlman could now leverage that stock to buy more stuff. But meanwhile, for every toy sold, Marvel got no dollars. So they had no money to pay off all their debts because they were getting no. So everybody who was fighting, like Jim Lee's group, Jim Shooter's group, every group who was fighting to own Marvel, the first thing they were going to do was break that Toy Biz deal, because they knew that deal was sinking Marvel. Getting no money from toys are lucrative. Getting no money from the toys was one of the reasons Marvel was in bankruptcy, it didn't help that they leveraged everything and weren't getting money in. So Ike knew if he didn't own Marvel, he was going to go broke because he'd no longer have toys to make with Toy Biz. So when he got that was like a lifeline to Ike. He was like, he won. So all those other guys, so now all of a sudden Marvel had all that money from toys coming in too, because Marvel and Toy Biz were the same thing. So that's an interesting little.
Yeah. But if Perlman had won, you would have been fired sooner because they were going to move to California.
Yeah, there was all sorts of stuff going on like that. All sorts of stuff.
Even Liefeld, that was the thing that Liefeld was complaining because they took away his Heroes Reborn deal because part of the Jim Lee conspiring with Perlman.
Yeah,
because it's right.
Well,
his
also
comics were selling better,
but they weren't making money, enough money, because the guy who made that deal, Jerry Cabrice, got fired before the Heroes Reborn stuff even came out. So we knew that by that that's what happened at Marvel all during that bankruptcy time and even before it. Some new vice president would come on, make some big deal, get fired before the deal, or move on before the deal even came to fruition, and the next guy would. They're like general managers in sports. General manager makes. Picks this number one draft pick quarterback, gets fired. The next general manager wants his own quarterback. So that quarterback gets cut and he drafts the next quarterback. The same thing was happening in Marvel all during that time. So the Heroes Reborn was dead in the water when Jerry Cabrice got fired. It didn't matter how much money it made. It wasn't going to be enough because the next guy wanted his deal coming through. And by the sixth issue of that Heroes Reborn stuff, it wasn't selling like the first issue, and they were late with a lot of it. Like I said, all the first issues were successful. By the time the six issues rolled around, it wasn't enough to justify a $6 million price tag. They could lose money with their regular guys. It was like everybody had a plan. Jim Shooter had to put together a group to buy. Everybody was putting a group together to buy Marvel. But like the judge just picked Ike Perlmutter. Why? I have no idea. Even in the book, reading the book where it said it was like the judge just picked him. So I don't know. I don't know what the odds are of Jim Lee's plan actually working. Getting Marvel at that point was really competitive, and Ike's chances of retaining Marvel were about that slim because he's the one who screwed it up. The judge wasn't going to side with him, especially with Carl Icahn fighting him. I think the judge picked Ike Perlmutter just because they weren't Carl Icahn and Ron Perlman. That's the only reason I can see. And like I said, there was other guys along the way.
Yeah, if it was a judge with experience in corporate law, he may have had biases depending on what.
This all took place in Delaware, the home of incorporation. It's like if you're a company, you incorporate in Delaware. Because that's the easiest. Because all the laws, Delaware is a small state that's set up so that companies can incorporate there and screw everybody. So that's where the bankruptcy was.
Going off on a tangent, talking about Delaware. Have you ever been to the Brandywine Museum in Delaware?
No.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Original N.C. Wyeth paintings out the wazoo.
Wow.
It's definitely worth going to. If you're ever in that area of the country, it's worth making a trip there.
All right. I was in Brandywine once because my friend went to college there and I went to visit him, but I don't think I went to the museum.
Yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, Delaware.
Not too awfully far. It's actually within driving distance of the Frazetta Museum as well in Pennsylvania.
That's right. There's a Norman Rockwell museum in New York State somewhere too. It's like an hour or two north of me. I know my friend's gone to it,
Gotcha.
but I don't think I've seen that one. What brand do you want? Yeah, I listened. I listened to like the first two of his Heroes, or maybe the first one, and then wrote my blog about it, and then haven't been able to get back into it again because I can only take so much Rob.
Yeah, the problem with his the problem with his podcast is that he does about 3 a week. So if you want to listen to all of them,
and he's
it'd be easy to get
not shy, and he's not shy about self-promoting. So there's a lot of self-promoting that you have to go. You have to go through a lot of Rob telling you how great he is. That is kind of like, all right, you can tone it down a little maybe for the podcast.
Yeah, the thing he was talking, Todd McFarlane kept telling me I couldn't beat 1 million. I can beat 1 million. I can beat 3 million. He kept saying, "What's an X-Force? What's an X-Force?" Liefeld likes to do a Todd McFarlane impression.
Yes. What killed me too about that, like I said, I don't think there's a lot of self-reflection with Rob.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he was talking about in the first one, he was talking about at this time, Todd McFarlane basically, became a scold. That became his role with us, where he'd say, where people would kept saying, because Todd McFarlane was getting Spawn out on time regularly. Mm-hmm. And all the comic shop owners were saying to Todd McFarlane, how come the other guys aren't? And Todd McFarlane was saying, guys, you got to get your books out regularly. And Rob Liefeld just wasn't interested in that. You can tell from he was just like, he just became a scold. I'm like, that's not being a scold. That's being a business partner trying to get you to live up to your obligations.
Right.
And there was like no sense of self-reflection in Todd at all in Rob at all, that he was doing something wrong at this time by not living up to him and Jim Lee not living up to their business obligations. Mm-hmm. And Todd McFarlane was just being a scold. And then they decided to go and work for the competition, Marvel. And it's like there was no self-reflection in his mind that he was betraying his business partner.
Right.
It just bounced off him.
Yeah, I want to see what he has to say when he gets to talk about the history of his self-publishing ventures after Maximum Press, when he has to talk about Awesome Entertainment and Arcade Comics.
Right. You know who would he
set up before they kicked him out of Image Comics. He set up his own outside publishing comic to compete with Image Comics. And it's like, what are you doing?
What was the name of that company? Was it Maximum or something?
Maximum, yeah. The thing is,
Maximum Press was that.
The thing is, if Maximum Press was just doing the Battlestar Galactica comics, it's not competing directly with Image, but Evangeline was very similar to Glory.
I'm just saying, if you're Rob Liefeld and you're a partner in Image Comics, and you set up another comics book company to make comics, what? You own a comic book company already.
At 2, Rob?
You want to compete with your own? There's no sense of self-reflection in him. It's just amazing. He just saw a way to make more money setting up a new, so he did. He just wanted to do it, so he did it. The idea that he was betraying his partners doesn't enter his mind. It's kind of amazing. And he's got no sense of self-reflection about that.
Going off on
most
a tangent,
people would be like, I can see the point of view, but I want to.
Yeah.
What was that?
Talking about people doing podcasts.
What was that, Scott?
I was just talking about people doing podcasts. I can imagine Howard Chaykin would make for a very interesting podcast.
Well, but he has it.
Just Howard Chaykin talk.
Yeah, but he has.
That's what I'm saying. Talking about whatever subject he want to talk about that week. Yeah.
No, but you go to the Comic Book Historians channel, and you find the Howard Chaykin interviews.
Yeah, I've seen several interviews done with some different creators.
Those are good. He's perfectly willing to tell you what he feels and thinks about things. That's what's
Oh
good
yeah,
about Howard.
he's not
He
shy
does
at all.
like so many people. What it is almost everyone in comics is a freelancer, and almost everyone in comics has had to work for Marvel and DC at one time, and you get in the habit of never saying anything bad about anyone because you might have to work for them soon.
Right.
So people like don't want to name names, don't want to say even like 30 years later, and the person is dead. They're still in the habit of, I don't want to name names. That's just the way people are in comics.
Right.
It's like, I don't want to say such and such was a bad guy because he might hire me. It's like he died 5 years ago. He can't. He got fired 10 years ago. He can't hire you.
Right.
But people still don't want to say stuff. Like when I was writing that blog on my blog on Heroes Reborn, I actually ran it by my friend Bunch, who was like, I don't remember any of this. Then I ran it by Marie Javins, who's, she's publishing DC Comics now, so she's got a big job. And she doesn't want to make waves. I know that. But she read it for me. She's like, better change this word. People might get mad at you or this word. And I was just like, people get mad at me. Nobody cares. I did end up changing a few words because I think she picked better words. And she was right on it. She's like, you might not want to use this word. Might want to, and she was right. But I'm like, no one's getting mad at me. No one's going to hire me anyway for anything in comics. It doesn't matter if I badmouth Ralph Macchio. No one cares. Ralph's never going to see this, and Ralph's never going to hear this, and Ralph's never going to care, and Ralph's never going to hire. Ralph never hired me in the first place, will never hire me in the second place or the third place, so it doesn't matter who gets mad at me in comics. It doesn't affect me.
Right.
But most people aren't like that. Most people are like, I can't say anything bad about Ralph. Not that I even really said anything bad about him here, but I will some other time. But it's like, that's the way people are in comics. They don't want to name names. They don't want to say something bad about someone or something else. And it's just like, if someone acted like a jerk, you can point out they acted like a jerk. It's okay.
Right. It would just be interesting to see some of the older creators too. Maybe not older per se, but people have been around for a while. Just to hear the different stories they have.
Yeah, but they won't often, unlike Howard, who will tell you the story warts and all. Most people won't. Most people won't name names and won't say bad things about people, even though those people did bad things.
Right.
So it's a little weird. Ooh, well, we're rolling up on 9 o'clock again. We missed Tim entirely. He said he was going to be here.
Mm-hmm.
We should roll out and end for the night. I'm running out of energy. I usually do around 9 o'clock. I usually like to finish with anything I'm doing about 9 o'clock because I go to bed at 11, around 11, a little after 11, so I can mellow out for a couple hours, watch a little TV, do nothing so I can fall asleep easily. Because if my mind's wound up when I'm trying to fall asleep. Yeah. I don't suffer from insomnia, but one of the reasons, or at least not nighttime falling asleep, sometimes I'm up too early. But I fall asleep easily. And one of the reasons I fall asleep easily is I have good habits. I end at 9, I mellow out for a couple of hours.
And I just hate it when you're trying to go to sleep and even your body may be tired, but your brain's going 100 miles an hour. So just stop.
Right. Like I said, I luckily that doesn't happen to me much, but it doesn't happen because I stop at 9. There have been times, like if I get into an internet argument at 10:30, forget it. So I don't like to get into internet arguments to begin with, but near bedtime, I'm still arguing in my head as I'm trying to fall asleep. It's like, no, can't do. All right, so we'll say goodnight to the 4 people who are watching. You guys have a good one out there, and we'll catch you next week.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.